and encouraging openness and no protection for councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the course of the meeting and are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be slanderous. With that, I note apologies this morning. I have Ken and Jane are here. Councillor Eatey is an apology, and I've got Titaru and Councillor Thompson on Zoom. Are you there, Paula? So call for apologies for Councillor Toyeti, please. Would somebody like to move? Councillor Thurston, Councillor seconded by Councillor Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. Public forum, there is none. Items not on the agenda, late items. There are none. Order of business as will be as in the agenda. And can I call for any declarations of conflict of interest, please? There are none. We'll move on to
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Page 24 with regard to P.F. Olsen, as mentioned. Quayside is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
On that.
Well done, Councillor Crosby. Yep. Just noting that conflict of interest. Thank you, Councillor.
Chairman, I think Councillor White's trying to say something, but he hasn't got his.
Titaru, I can't hear you, bud.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Likewise, same conflict of interest that Councillor Crosby has mentioned.
Noted. Thank you, Titaru. Moving on to minutes of the confirmation of the 5th of September 2023. Somebody like to move that they be taken as read? Be confirmed. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Nees. Is there any matters arising? I have one. There was the review by Warwick Vincent of the Lake Rotorua Science Review. He came up with about 17 recommendations or some number of recommendations, and it was very much in scientific speak, and I didn't understand it. So I got Andy Brewer to translate to layman's terms, and those layman's terms recommendations are now in diligence so that we know what Warwick Vincent was talking about. So they're in diligent under. So we've moved into confirmed. I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Bench carried. Moving straight on to our presentations. We have 3 presentations this morning. First up is the Bay Conservation Alliance update, and hopefully on Zoom is Michelle Elborn. Welcome along, Michelle. You presented to us earlier in the year, so this is an update for the end of the year. Welcome along. The floor is yours.
Tō katoa. Thank you for the welcome, Chair and Councillors. My pleasure to come and speak with you this morning, and apologies that I'm not in Whakatane, but we've got our cadet closing ceremony at midday today, so I will be supporting that. So you know, Bay Conservation has a focus on Indigenous biodiversity. And so just a reminder that our purpose is to grow the capability and impact of our communities and partners to restore Indigenous biodiversity. So today's a great opportunity to come and give you a little bit of a report back. You had a strong focus on supporting volunteers in your last long-term plan, and we've been able to play a role in that from a conservation perspective. So yeah, just sort of sharing a bit of an update, but this is just a reminder of the 3 sort of core areas that we are focused on with the funding that you have provided. So really it's about providing some professional support to those volunteer groups. It was about growing the number of groups that are supported under BCA, and a big focus on the training and capability building. So I just thought I would highlight this. Each year we put together an annual report which really looks at the collective impact of conservation groups across the Bay of Plenty. And here I just want to pick out the volunteer hours that have been achieved over, this was for 2022. And you can see that there's over 52,000 hours delivered by volunteers. Now, if we were going to equate that to paying the minimum wage, then we're looking at close to $1.2 million worth of time that has been invested. And it's really worth noting that this doesn't include all regional council care groups. It doesn't include the effort going in through initiatives like predator-free BOP and all the additional sustainability projects that EnviroHub is supporting. So I think we can see here just, quite a considerable effort that's being provided across the Bay of Plenty from an environmental perspective. Again, here you can see over 8,000 pests removed, which is fantastic, 65,000 plants in the ground, and I can tell you that that number is going to be much higher for 2023. I think it's really important to celebrate volunteers, and 2 weeks ago, BCA had its end-of-year members group event. Last year, we started running some outstanding contribution to volunteer awards. We did the same again this year. The recipients this year were Ark Wildlife Trust. They've just hit their 20-year anniversary of supporting wildlife rehabilitation. We also acknowledged Graham and Carmel from Kaharoa, a very long-standing care group with some quite outstanding achievements, and also Whakatane Kiwi Trust, also a relatively long-standing group. I also want to acknowledge the Flax Roots Interagency group. So this is for the Western Bay of Plenty, and it involves Regional Council, the District Council, City Council, EnviroHub, New Zealand Land Care Trust, ourselves, and more recently, Manaaki Kaima Mamaku Trust. So we meet 4 times a year to make sure that we're aligning with the efforts and the support that we're providing and look at ways in which we can work together. So last weekend was an end-of-year volunteer recognition day. We took a busload of volunteers and visited Project Parori and Ongatiti Forest Project. And it was a fantastic day to bring volunteers together and help them connect. So just providing a little bit of examples of some of the areas that we're providing our groups with support. One area is certainly for our groups operating on DOC conservation land, helping them with some of the processes that they need to navigate, whether that be toxin application permits, wildlife permits, and so on. And we know that that's hugely valued because some of those processes can be quite challenging. Working with yourselves on Kiti Taio, I think there's been huge progress over the last 18 months in terms of care groups and conservation groups getting their data onto this platform. This is an awesome asset for us to be able to really sort of look at what the collective impact is of everybody participating. You're aware that BCA supports groups with funding applications through Tech, Bay Trust and other funders. And we did a bit of a tally up of how much we've helped unlock for groups since we started this back in 2019. And we're currently sitting at 2.17 million. So that's, an area of support that we're quite proud of. We're seeing more member groups with paid capability, and we really sort of see that marrying professional support and volunteer support is where you can really gain some great progress. I'll just pick up on iwi engagement as well. That's an area we're looking to focus a lot more strongly on next year, and are planning to come and do some engagements with iwi hapu forums through the council forums throughout 2024. So we were required to grow groups that sit under BCA. So here's a list of the groups that have joined us, and we have a number of other groups lining up. There's quite a diversity. So some are quite education focused, some are specifically on a particular area of land. We've had more regional council care groups join, and then we've had groups that we didn't even know exist, and they've been new, and they've come into play, and we're able to sort of accelerate their startup. So a little bit of an overview of some of the training capability building type offerings that we've been providing. I think the key to note here is that they're not just available to BCA member groups. So a number of these training opportunities we also promote to regional council care group volunteers, and we also promote them to the hapu-led project groups through Manaaki Kaima Mamaku Trust. So a real driver when we run volunteer training is actually also sort of a co-benefit, is that connection of meeting volunteers or participants from other groups and sharing those learnings and knowledge across them. I'm often asked how the cadet program is tracking, so I thought I would just include that today. So we're just about to complete intake 9 today. We've got funding for 4 more intakes, so that will take us through to conclude in April 2025. We're now sort of starting the process to look at possible longer term funding partners. We'd very much like to continue the program given the successes that it's realizing. We're still tracking at an 87% success rate of post-employment from us into conservation primary industry roles. We've got a lot of employers saying to us that they see that there's huge value in this program, and that if they see somebody that's come through this program, they're prioritizing them for interviews at their end. So yes, certainly something that we are going to be investigating whether we can continue or not. If you haven't come across it yet, early last week, a new documentary series was released on Radio New Zealand. And episode 4 is featuring one of our former cadets, Poda, who's now working for Tapawika. And it really is the story of his sort of journey post-COVID, coming through the cadet program and now working for Tapawika and supporting the KEEP project, which is a Kokako corridor program between Otaniwainuku and Kaharawa. So if you haven't seen it, I suggest you check that out. I just wanted to, just acknowledge that we're really now at a point where we've got quite a lot of connectivity with other regions around New Zealand. So BCA was part of a pilot program through DOC, which now connects us to 7 different similar entities across the North and South Island. And we have an online hui every 6 weeks, facilitated by Predator Free NZ Trust in Wellington. And this has been a really awesome sort of opportunity to see how other regions are developing and also share, I think, some of the great kaupapa that is happening here in the Bay of Plenty. So last week I was invited across to Waikato Regional Council. They've been working on a collective impact project for a number of years now. It's stalled for a bit, and they're really starting to pick that up. So they're really looking at how can they, given they've got quite a large sort of land space there, and they've got a number of really awesome projects, but well spread out, how do they create the connectivity? Do they want an entity similar to BCA, or what is the best solution to meet their needs? And that's something that I'm going to continue to be involved in. But I think it's acknowledging that the Bay of Plenty actually is showing some great leadership in this space. So finally, I just want to acknowledge some of the challenges, and I'll also call them opportunities, because I tend to try and hold myself as an optimist, which is really important working in this domain. So funding climate change and biodiversity loss, atop of the list for me from the very much interrelated. We know that many Jobs for Nature projects are coming to an end shortly, and there are a number that really warrant continuation, including our cadet program, but many on the ground initiatives. So we know that there's pressure coming in all directions, including government, local government, where funding is concerned. So just to note that there is a meeting coming up shortly, which has been sort of instigated by Louise at Manaaki Kaimau Mamiku Trust, but lots of players coming together to look at investment models for restoration work, looking at business investment, corporate, and what models can we look to think out of the square in terms of funding future restoration work. And I really just want to note climate change. I'm pleased to see it's on your agenda later today. It is an ongoing conversation for yourselves. This year's been a real wake-up call, I think, for New Zealand in terms of really seeing the impacts of climate change. And I think together we need to continue working on this. Equally with biodiversity loss, a huge challenge for us. So we really value the support that you've provided to date in terms of enabling volunteers. I think we should be really proud of what we're achieving here in the Bay of Plenty, and we hope to continue to stand beside you to achieve more in the future. Thank you very much for your time, and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and just noting you were coming in loud and clear, so thank you for that.
Awesome.
Just a quick from me, Michelle, before I open it up to the floor. You said just your cadet program. This is the 9th intake. How many cadets have you put through your program in total, and how many cadets go through each intake?
Yes, so okay, so we put 11 cadets through any given intake, and most intakes have had 11 complete. We've had, I think, 1 dropout, and we've had 1 intake where we started with 10. So yeah, we're sitting at 90 something cadets trained as of completion today.
Thank you for that. Just open the floor to questions to Michelle, please. Councillor Nees.
Apologise, Mr. Chair, it's not a question, just I went and had a look at your annual report and picked up your last year's annual report, not this year's, and I've just got to congratulate you on your growth, because comparing this report you've just given us with your last annual report, you've doubled your number of volunteers by the look of it, and a 50% increase in your total volunteer hours. So huge growth, and the impact you're making in the community is amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nees. I mean, I think that's certainly a reflection of more member groups coming on board, which means that we're sort of capturing that. But yeah, it is really exciting to see continued volunteer enthusiasm and commitment.
Question from Councillor McMillan.
Kia ora, Michelle. Just want to say massive congratulations to all the work you're doing, and everyone behind you. Really, really amazing. And congratulations to the cadets today that are graduating. Love your glass half full approach, and I think that's really important. Do you see any immediate direct impacts from the central government policy announcements at the end of last week, and how I imagine you could sort of see it coming to a certain degree, and yeah, how are you working through that, or is that a conversation to see how it pans out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're absolutely heading to more challenging times. I think, yeah, changing government, along with things like Jobs for Nature, big picture sort of investments coming to an end, is going to be very challenging. So yeah, I think it just reminds me of how much at a community level we need to stay strong and stay positive and unite in terms of the advocacy that we can do. So we'll certainly be looking at briefing papers to the Conservation Minister and new MPs locally. And I think collectively we're going to need to get louder.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, good answer. Get louder. Question from Councillor White. Go ahead to Taru.
Yeah, kia ora, Michelle. I thank you for the presentation. Really enjoyed it. I have seen Powder's efforts, and I think it's a great tribute to you guys for supporting that initiative. There are many more like them out there, Michelle. So I'm really pleased that you're going to be looking at iwi engagement. I see you mentioned Rotoiti 15 in there, and a number of land trusts and corporations. Of course, they have a lot of land holdings with a mix of forests and all sorts of pest problems happening. So encourage you down that line. And I just say, well done. And as I said again, Powder, being an ex-hunter, I know a few ex-hunters who have turned their hands to becoming rangers or moving into that space. Let me just say this: they know who all the potential poachers are too, by the way. So it's good to have that level of networking and understanding beside you. Kia ora, Michelle.
Yeah, kia ora. Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. Do we have a copy of that presentation, Amanda, on board? Because there's some really interesting numbers are there in your first slide that I'd like to look at again. We can get that. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Keep
Awesome.
up the good work.
Thank you for your time, team. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, our next presentation is from Laura Ragg of EnviroHub. Are you online too, Laura? You there? Floor's yours.
Yes, we're here.
Oh, good. Welcome along. Oh, Mary and Laura, welcome along. So this is a presentation from EnviroHub BOP. Floor's yours. Where you go.
Thank you. So I've got Mary Dillon, our chair here, sitting alongside me as well. Kia ora koutou, ko Laura Ragg toku ingoa e mahi ana ahau he tumuaki ki EnviroHub. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you all this morning and provide a brief recap of the previous 2.5 years of our community initiative funding. And then also a bit later, look towards the future and some of our aspirations and plans. Sorry, we can't be there in person today. We're doing some filming here later to support Mary's Western Bay Community Awards Heart of the Community nomination. So the frequency of weather-related destruction as a result of our climate most definitely changing has been something that's been hard to comprehend. And it seems suddenly very close to home and no longer a distant concern. The seemingly annual wildfires in Canada and Australia and tropical storms affecting our Pacific neighbours that we've become used to in recent years continue to happen. But now it is also the incredible amounts of heavy rain that has caused flooding and erosion in our neighbouring regions within Aotearoa and also here in the Bay of Plenty. It is a reality that demands our immediate attention and action, and it is undeniable that we are facing these challenges with some trepidation and uncertainty, but also a good deal of hope. There are some courageous conversations to have with our people around preparedness and resilience, especially given the Bay of Plenty's large coastline. How do we urgently help people to help themselves to ensure they are in a better position to cope when these weather events happen? So we've compiled...
Laura, can I just stop you there, Laura? Are you controlling the PowerPoint? Are you moving through your slides? Because we've still got the first one on.
Yeah, that's all right. We're going to the next one now. So we've compiled a brief review of the last couple of years, featuring some of our favourite moments and a summary of what we have achieved.
Thank you. Yep.
So we're constantly looking for new ways to reach more people more often and more effectively. We've been having some great success using various social media platforms, and we'll continue to grow our capabilities in this area. We're moving with the times and now have a team member expertly advising us and keeping us current and relevant on these platforms to engage new audiences with our monthly campaigns. We've continued to deliver a wide variety of in-person events as part of Sustainable Backyards and Sustainable Backyards Bite Size throughout the region. Sustainable textiles is something that we're passionate about, and championing slow fashion and encouraging everyone to be conscious consumers of the things they buy, particularly in relation to textiles, where many tonnes are sent daily to landfill. Our regional environment network continues to evolve with more sustainable living focus groups coming on board too. Our specialist recycling is growing both in terms of what we can collect and its popularity, and we are seeing more and more customers coming and dropping off their items. Predator-free staging backyard trash kill rats. Trap uptake has been steady around the region, and collectively it's making a difference, and we need to ensure people are recording their kills. Our focus for the next few years will be to develop and scale up our programs and initiatives, ensuring that we can reach even more people and communities. We want to connect more people and raise awareness about our climate changing and build resilience at a community and individual level. Our first Climate Action Festival week was a resounding based on the feedback we received, with people keen for it to be repeated. And so we are already planning our next annual offering for September. One of the highlights for our Speakers Forum, we heard from inspiring individuals on a variety of topics, and our youngest speaker on the night was a 17-year-old student from Otamotai College who gave a compelling speech and provided us with renewed hope for the future, knowing there are young leaders like that coming through with such energy, talent and passion. We're just in the process of launching a bike library pilot in Rotorua for community housing residents. There will be a mix of e-bikes and also a selection of purest pedal-powered bikes for residents to borrow to get around. Look forward to tracking the results of this trial, which aims to help residents better get around using bikes as opposed to cars. The introduction of a trap library to certain areas within Tauranga and Western Bay has meant that residents are able to borrow traps to target other pest species like possums and mustelids, which is an important next step in this urban backyard-focused initiative. An extra service for specialist recycling soon to be launched will be Tetra Pak collection at our hub in Glasgow Street. And we are currently on track to reach 1 tonne of specialist recycling by the end of the year. These are items that would otherwise have ended up in landfill. Our Green Team app is now live, and we've recently added an op-shop directory for Tauranga Moana. We will formally launch the app during Sustainable Backyards. Space for Nature is our latest offering to Bay of Plenty residents as part of our Wairiki Park region movement, encouraging more biodiversity at a backyard level, currently only available to residents within the Katikati area of the Western Bay of Plenty. It's an initiative to celebrate and support urban residents, schools and businesses who are protecting biodiversity in their backyards and encourage others to do the same. The overarching goal for the programme is to increase biodiversity and reduce pest species from residents' properties by providing wildlife-friendly habitats, keeping wildlife safe from predators and pets, encouraging people to observe with their wider neighbourhood and get involved in local care groups. Members sign a pledge to make space for nature and receive welcome pack, rat trap, native plant and sign. We can give further resources and support such as trap libraries and regular activations. Members put their sign on their gate or letterbox, which helps to spread the initiative that way too. With our Green Team now launched with its monthly theme for Future Fit goals, support regional goals for climate change and our Wairiki Park region aspirations, it provides a tool to engage with more people more frequently. We are able to upload motivating challenges for people to achieve and also highlight events that may be of interest to users. It is about acknowledging and celebrating steps people are taking to reduce their impact on our planet. We are also hoping to bring more gamification to the app and engage younger users and unlock rewards with local businesses. So we have various tools, projects and programs that support our vision for a greener, healthier, wilder, more resilient region. We need to engage as many people as possible through the tools and programs we wish to implement and or scale up. In the next few years, increase our presence in Rotorua and Eastern Bay by increasing our connectors hours and therefore our capacity to deliver more programs and activation, the unique sub-region flavour. We'd really like to thank Bay of Plenty Regional Council, both at the government and operational level, for all the funding and support which has enabled us to deliver what we have to date. And we really look forward to continuing to partner with you in the future to deliver more great mahi. Ngā mihi.
Well, thank you, Laura. Thank you for your presentation. I'll open the floor up to questions, Laura, and then final words from you if you want to, Mary. So questions to Laura and members of the Enviro Hub team. Questions? Councillor McMillan and then Councillor Campbell. Councillor McMillan.
Kia ora, Laura, Mary. Thank you so much. Really exciting seeing all your work laid out like that. Amazing achievements. I'm just wondering, in terms of the circular economy space, how you connect with business and what's your vision there in terms of getting bigger cut through with in that circular economy space and kind of broadening that out. And do you connect with, for example, our Bear Connections and Priority One, etc.? I just wonder what that all looks like in the kind of circular economy space.
Yeah, I think our sort of place in this at the moment has been around supporting people to make those choices. So where we know businesses are doing good stuff, promoting them and encouraging people to support them that way. We have regular conversations with Priority One and pick up some of their initiatives to promote that to our sort of very wide network that we have. But it's a space that we definitely like to be more involved with, and Green Team is a really good opportunity to do further promotion of those objectives, really.
Thank you.
Question, councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Laura, for a great presentation. There's one thing it's really rich on at my heart, and that's specialist recycling. And I'm just wondering, how do we actually audit? And I've got to be a bit careful here because I might be throwing a few of my council colleagues under the, not around this table, but territorial colleagues. How do we audit what actually does go to landfill? Because I know that a number of places I've been as of late, I see a lot of stuff sitting in their pits that has actually been dutifully recycled by the community, and then it just gets tossed in the pit and off to Terra here. So how do we actually go about auditing that, please?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I suppose that there's still a lot of wish cycling that happens. There's a lot of people putting stuff in to their what should be recyclable, which then prevents that from being recycled. I don't know the specific instance that you're talking about, but there could be a bit of that it might look like it could be recycled, but actually because it's contaminated or people have put other stuff in there, that's meant that it's not been able to be recycled. I mean, it's education really, and making sure that we tell those stories and having that consistency across the different regions, making it clear what can and can't be recycled, certainly makes it easy for people.
I guess that's my concern too, because different territorials have different some will say they can recycle certain plastics and some can't, but I can assure you that I know what I put in my recycling bin, and I've been around the game for a few years now, but I have to say that I was quite disappointed when I go to my transfer station and see a whole lot of my recycled stuff dumped in the pit. So I'm just saying, who is actually auditing it? Is regional council doing that? Are you doing it, or is nobody doing it? It's been going on for many years. Let's be brutally frank about this. And when we were running our own landfills, there was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes after hours with diggers and burying rubbish that should have been either recycled, or if it can't be recycled, what I'm saying is then we need to look at something else. That's all.
Yeah, and not make stuff out of whether it be certain types of plastic or whatever. If we can't recycle it in this country, let's push back and not make things out of that in the first place. I'm not sure. I presume they get audited by councils, do they, Mary?
Well, most of them, but I think the councils in this area send them out of the council to a waste management facility, but somebody there should be auditing what's actually going into the waste itself. That's the first signal that part of the stuff that is being recycled is not working. But I think you have to bear in mind that recycling is way down the chain in terms of managing waste, and I think one of our jobs is to constantly talk to people and remind them that it's much more about consumption and the choices you make when you hand over that dollar about what you actually purchase. And that's where I think the big change needs to come. You won't have the waste if people won't buy things that cannot be recycled or that are bad for the environment.
Yeah, thank you for that. I suppose that's as easy as stopping people from smoking. Thank you.
Question from councillor Thompson. Are you online, Paula? There you go.
Morena. Yes, I am. Hi, Mary. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Great presentation as usual. Hey, the new government has flagged that it intends to make the NPS Indigenous biodiversity disappear. What's your strategy for dealing with that?
What was the question?
Strategy for dealing with it. Paula, I think we have to just continue. What is will be. The government is the government, and it will do what it now wants to do, and we have to live within that context, keeping the flag of it and constantly putting pressure on them for things to be better. But I think one of the advantages of where it works, which is really at that grassroots level, what happens in terms of sustainability and climate change, all the volunteer groups we have, and for all the work that they do, they represent a tiny fraction. One of our jobs is to get at that other 90% who don't participate in human use, to get them to change that level. No government, that's over to us and to groups like us who actually work in that space. The personal change in each individual's life is what will make the big difference in the country being sustainable.
Well said.
Wise words. Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation this morning. Keep up the good work, and we acknowledge the work that you do on behalf of our community, and you're big fans of. We're big fans of yours and BCA. So thank you. Keep up the good work, and thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. Enjoy your day.
Okay. Cheers. Our third presentation this morning, State Highway 35 Motu Bluffs debris flow incident from the forest, and we're welcoming in person this morning Sally Strang and Reuben Hawtrey. Reuben's a former employee of Regional Council. Welcome back, Reuben and Sally. Floor's yours. We saw the videos. We saw the debris flows that were captured by a fellow fisherman from Waihau Bay returning back to the coast. Returning back. So yeah, Sally, floor's yours.
Yeah, thank you. And I saw that you discussed this at your last meeting, and we've discussed it with your staff, and made the suggestion that perhaps we could talk with you. And I brought Reuben with me because he's been directly involved both in the lead up to it and so I'm National Environmental Manager. Reuben looks after the eastern area. Familiar with it. And I thought just before I start into it, I know people get confused about forest managers and ownership in New Zealand, so just who we are. So we work for Manulife Forest Management, was formerly Hancock Forest Management. It was rebranded a couple of years ago. We manage for 3 clients only, so we're a bit different to others. We only have those 3 clients. Taumata Plantations, Tiaki Plantations and OTPP, which is...
Where are they in the bay?
Yeah, so we manage 220,000 hectares total from the King Country is the furthest south up to Northland, and Auckland, Waikato, plenty, a little bit in Hawke's Bay. A mix of freehold, lease, forestry rights. And so in the bay of our 220,000 hectares, about a quarter, I actually worked it out yesterday, 55,000 hectares is in the Bay of Plenty, and that's our forests that we manage on that map. So you can see it spread across the whole of the Bay of Plenty. Some of you will be familiar with the bigger ones, Tarawera, Matahina, the Tanigatua forests, and then a number of Māori lease blocks up the eastern Bay of Plenty coast, which are arguably some of our more challenging forest management. That's us. Obviously, the focus today is Hauporo, the Motu Bluffs incident. I assume you all know where that is. Where State Highway 35 crosses the Motu River. Hauporo Forest is the one on the Horiki side, so the side of the river. Where the incident happened is the red dot. So I believe some of you have been out and seen it. It's very steep country. So Hauporo Forest is made up of 3 leases from 3 different landowner trusts. The debris came out of Hauporo Te Pua Trust, which is the largest of them. And then just a bit of background, I guess, I'm sure people understand forestry is a very long-term business. So we're dealing with decisions, I guess, that were made decades ago, and by different owners and different managers, really. So landowners, Hauporo Te Pua Trust, leases in that, our leases in that part of the world were established by Caxton Paper Mills back in the 70s. So they arranged the leases 99-year lease, so it expires in 2075. And in those days, PF Olsen was managing for Caxton, so they undertook the planting. And the planting of those forests were undertaken through from the mid-70s to early 80s. The last stands were planted in 1980. And a former staff member commented to me, we talk about what's been planted and some of it's really pushed the boundaries. And he said, I guess from a landowner perspective as far as returns to the landowners, but also from the forest owner point of view, they really were trying to maximise the productive area. So that's kind of pushed them potentially into areas that maybe in hindsight they shouldn't have. In terms of who came next, Carter Holt Harvey bought Caxton's Forest in 1987, and then Taumata, our client, bought Carter Holt Harvey forests in 2006, and that included those lease forests. So now that lease is held by our client Taumata Plantations, and we manage on their behalf. So there's a lot of people have been involved, and in terms of that area, so Carter Holt Harvey started the harvesting in that forest in 2000, so we've been harvesting in there ever since. It's had 23 years of harvest. That area above the State Highway 35 and the Motu River has long been identified as a problem in a high-risk area. We've got a catchment risk assessment process, and we gave I think we had low, medium and high, and it got assigned as very high, even though it wasn't one of our criteria. Just the risk of debris movement is just so steep and right down onto the highway. And then so Carter Holt Harvey actually planted it in 2005, and it's kind of been sitting there ever since. And I guess people have put it off because they knew it was going to be difficult and high risk. And then more recently, it started to wind blow. The trees are getting bigger and older. And in discussion with the landowners, they didn't want us just to leave the trees there and let them continue to grow and wind blow. So from the decision, it wasn't a universally, I don't think the decision was universal as to whether to go ahead with harvest. I think it was seemed to be the right thing to do to try and get the trees off and get as many of the trees off as we could. So it was harvested early this year, January, February, and always the plan has been to retire the area to harvest. The crew were, the instruction really was to get what you can safely and then we'll deal with the rest. So it was extremely steep and challenging, the job, and it wasn't an economic operation. So I guess there's this kind of view that people are just making money.
So it wasn't
an economic operation. I can't stress that enough. Absolutely, it was a cash burn to try and get the trees off.
Can we just ask, through, or do you want to finish it?
Oh, you can ask
at
questions.
the end, Andrew. Let Sally finish.
I've got some pictures and bits and bobs, and then welcome to ask questions. So that's the harvest plan, and the yellow ovals, the area that where the debris came from. What else have I got here? So this is aerial photography of the area from a year or two ago, and it's just showing the wind blow starting to extend into it's all of those brown areas. So this is where the debris came from. You can see the wind blowing trees.
So where did it blow out? Oh, that's the road at the top.
So that's State Highway 35. This is where it came out, and this is the kind of the holes where it came from. But you can see wind throw all through these stands. So that's really what prompted the decision to harvest. We've seen it in other forests that wind throw can then lead to debris movement and large scale debris movement. That's the problem we're dealing with. And the other thing is then just really, really steep. So again, that's where it came out of. That red colour is 40 to 45 degree slopes. The grey is over 45 degree slopes, so 45, 50 degrees. That's, you couldn't walk down there. That's damn steep. Harvesting contractor has sort of described it as near vertical. And so the bulk of the debris that came out was from within that area of wind blown, that steep country. I've heard comments about that, and you could see in the video cut stems in amongst the debris that came out, but it was from harvesting on those steep slopes when they felled the trees and they fell from the bottom up. Some of the stems fall and just started to slide, and once they start to slide, they keep going, and then just don't stop till they hit the bottom and got tangled up in the wind blow. It's just not safe to get them out or practical. And ordinarily in a situation like that, we would bring in the heavy lift chopper, which we've used a bit in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. But because of the age of the trees, they're 43 years old, they're getting up 4 to 5 tonnes. And then if you've got wind throw, they're all locked in together. The maximum lift for the heavy lift chopper is 3 tonnes, so we're kind of limited. The only way we could use the chopper is to get a manual faller and then start cutting things to get them down to a weight that we can deal with. So that's that. What else have I got here? So in terms of what happened, you all saw the video. So that was on Sunday. The rainfall came from the local community and the school, so 245 mils, 200 mils over 10 hours, so it was a pretty heavy rain event. From the video, it would appear that something's has dammed up, it must have, and then let go. So this is what our stuff, came out to on Monday. So we got rung on Sunday by Higgins and the landowners. Came through to Reuben. So Higgins went for Waka Kotahi. They were the immediate response. They got the road open actually on the Sunday, but then reclosed it because Waka Kotahi were concerned about the risk of more debris coming down. Our staff got out there on Monday along with the landowners and our contractors. And there was also a geotech person up the slope checking that the slope was safe to reopen the road. So then the road was open. Our staff made a plan to clean up the debris. So at that stage, there was a bit of debris left on the road, and then obviously that debris that was deposited down on the banks of the river. So over that week, we got our contractors involved. So we had our harvesting contractor and our earthworks contractor on site. They cleaned up everything they could from the bottom of the gully, the road, the flank of the road, but the stuff down on the riverbed, they needed access across the river to clean up. So that, and then that was end of August, and then our machine operator got unwell for a couple of days. He was sick, and then it was whitebait season, so that's why there was a bit of a delay. Whitebait season meant we couldn't cross river without agreement from everybody, and there was actually agreement from DOC Regional Council, but in discussion with the community that it was their preference that we delayed it till after whitebait season. And it wasn't actually a risk, it was a sitting, so that was a decision that was made. So that went through September, October, and as soon as the whitebait season finished, we got our machines out and it's now cleaned up. In terms of where it came from, so that photo on the left is taken from the bottom, looking up, and the photo on the right is obviously looking back the other way. You can just see it's very, very steep, and the bottom of the gully, the crossed up material on the bottom of the gully is pushed out. And a few other pictures I've got there, and you can see the material that's left on the slope. So that the bulk of that is wind thrown trees. You can see root balls attached to the stems, and just really difficult to get that material out. There was discussion about bringing in a tethered falling machine to try and come down the slope and cut the stems off the root balls so they could get them out. The call was made, you were probably part of that discussion, were you, that it was just going to make more risk and mess, and they felt that they were stable where they were, which I guess they're still there, so it was the right call. But the plan now is to get the chopper in and just get what we can. We won't be able to get all of it, but we'll get what we can. And I guess with and that's been held up because the choppers, the Black Hawk has been through a process of maintenance and recertifications out of the year for a couple of months, but as soon as that's ready, we'll go again. And I guess with every month that passes and warmer weather, some of that material will be drying out and getting a little bit lighter, so that kind of helps in our favour. So as far as the follow-up, the final cleanup has been completed. The heavy lift chopper operation will either be December or early next year, as soon as it's available. A big issue for us is managing the area that we've harvested back to native. So that part of the world does regenerate readily in native vegetation, but the issue will be it will also regenerate in radiata pine. And so that's going to be a big issue for us managing that, especially on that steep country where manual access is going to be tricky. So that will be, herbicides will be needed and probably drone or chopper work. So it's going to be an ongoing challenge for us, and it's quite a reasonable area. And then for both questions from our board and from Bay of Plenty Regional Council about what other stands have we got out there. So just quantifying all of that, this is the worst. absolutely, but we have other stands that haven't been able to be harvested in places. And in Waikawa, we've got areas that have wind blown that we haven't been able to recover. So just quantifying all of that and the plan. And then there's also, you will have seen if you've been out there, there's still 13 hectares of trees standing on the really steep face above the highway. And so that's an issue itself. So that kind of shows that different representation of the map. That's a photographic part of it, and that's our road edge representation of that area, which I thought was useful to kind of give you an idea of the topography.
13 hectares, is that north-facing bluff you talk about?
Yeah, 13 hectares is all this stuff. So when they harvested, they got what they could, and then there's just stuff that they can't get access to. So with the black lines around it, this bit here is that bit there, and on this, the green lines represent where there's still trees standing. So that's being discussed internally, also with the regional council, Waiwaka Kotahi, and the landowners and the community as to what the options are. As really isn't safe to harvest. It's I thought in the past maybe helicopter logging, but the size of the trees is the issue. That you'd not only have to manual fall it, which is not ideal, but you would the fallers would then have to go down the slope and cut the stems into smaller logs to be able to get them off. And in that topography, we would just be worried that they'll take off and they'll go over the highway and through the guardrail and down through the native and into the river. So harvesting's kind of off the table. So then we talk poisoning inside, and either chopper or manual fill and poison. And obviously with chopper, the concern is that we would get some damage to the understory and potentially surrounding natives. So we decided that manual is the best option to poison the standing trees. And that's been arranged. You haven't spoken to Nuttall lately, but it's any time. Yeah, so through those, we've had several discussions, and that's kind of been agreed that it's the least bad of a bunch of bad options. So yeah, kind of summary, it shouldn't have been planted. One of our past area managers said that even at the time, he said they shouldn't have planted that, they should have pulled the trees out at the time. If we could do things differently, I guess if you could turn back time, we would have planted it. We would have dealt with it earlier when they were younger trees and they were smaller and we had more options. Yeah, that said, it's it was even challenging to get a road to it, let alone harvest it. So some of our staff have said they're not sure that we would have been able to deal with it back. We've had years of experience harvesting in steep country since we took over. This harvest was solely to address the legacy issue and attempt to reduce the risk, and that is what the landowners want. That the landowners don't want us to hand them back a forest in 2075 that's got all of these risks remaining in big old trees that are going to cause problems. So understandably, they want us to deal with them. Well, as I said, it wasn't an economic operation. We've done what we tried to do our best to get the cleanup undertaken, but ongoing monitoring is required. So we're in discussion with Waka Kotahi about that, just to make sure that area is flagged as a high risk area and people are keeping an eye on it. And there's been communication, actually good communication between the range of parties, Waka Kotahi and the community have been good. And so, yeah, our final bit is to try and get it back to native cover. So it's not going to be a short-term fix, and for a while it's probably not going to look that great in terms of us poisoning the trees in particular. It will be a bit confronting for a minute. I think that's, yeah, most.
Thank you, Sally. There will be questions.
Of course, there will be questions.
I've got just a couple from me. So you said you're going to retire it and put it into natives. I assume it's sort of Manuka, Kanu sort of thing, rather than big trees.
Yeah, so we'll just let it regenerate, and where we've retired something like 13% of Hauporus so far, and it does regenerate into Pittosporums, Manuka, Pampas also though, will be a problem. But then, yeah.
And after Cyclone Gabriel came through Hawke's Bay, we know this region dodged a bullet in terms of rainfall, and we got Ruben and the team to identify risky areas in our region, and it was Waikawa and Motu were the two biggest. Risky bits in steepness and soil type, similar to Gisborne. So the question is, you've talked about retiring the land, shouldn't have been planted in the first place, accept that. But the question is from us is the risks to the ongoing community in terms of, and I think you've answered it by poisoning, but there's still risks of those trees coming down in another storm and wind throw / call it whatever you like. The risk is still there. And how do you mitigate that risk?
Yeah, so I think you're right, probably, would you say Motu Bluffs and Waikawa, those forests out of our whole estate are some of our highest risk forests, and
the geology is not quite the same as Gisborne though there. We run into that mudstone more in Waihao Bay. It's still greywacke back there, so
yes, we're on greywacke argillite, but steep.
it.
Yeah, absolutely steep. So poisoning, definitely retirement. So Waikawa, I mean, and obviously it's not just our decision in terms of retiring because it's not our land. So it's a conversation with landowners. And there is quite extensive retirement also planned in Waikawa. And that's going to be a challenge for us in terms of managing the regenerating radiata, because that's a big issue, because otherwise we just end up with a very, very high stocking standard of wilding radiata.
Thrashing the poisoning option though has been a million times with all the stakeholders, and the idea is if we leave it and not do anything, they will fall over at some stage and create more issues. But if we poison them or reduce the windage sale, there's less likelihood of them falling over. So if we can get through that period and then they start to break down within themselves, there's always going to be a risk that some are going to end up on the highway, but it's the best of the...
So the poisoning, and you hope the trees will die and then the regeneration will come through and take over as the trees fall up.
Yeah.
And then manage the regen.
Much less likely to blow over like they have roots and all if they're poisoned, because they lose their needles and they lose the wind resistance. There is a reasonable understory on that Motu Bluffs of nature, so it's opened up, that should come away, and that's why we're wanting the manual poisoning option so that we don't damage any understory. And in Waikawa is an issue because there's been a lot of wind throw, as some will know, 2 years ago. The road, yeah. Imagine if we had a video of that. We've got both clients are amazing, that they've really stayed the course and really fronted up, particularly in Waikawa. Spent a lot of time, it's spent a lot of money recovering wind blow to reduce that risk, but there are some stands that we just can't, it's just not safe. And so we've done a bit of chopper work in there, and we just keep monitor it, but a big thing is managing the radiata regen so that we do our best to get it back into native cover.
Okay, questions from the floor, Sally? I've got Andrew, Ken and Malcolm. Councillor Von Daniel.
Thank you. As Councillor Thompson, who's on Zoom, would say, this is a wicked problem and it is massive. I've been I farmed for 17 years and a lot of forestry. I wouldn't like your headache at the moment. As I went through at the start, I was looking at your figures saying these were planted in the 70s and 80s, and I'm thinking these are pine forests. You know, it's no wonder you're getting a problem with windblow once they're getting that old. Is that half the problem, is that they were left too long in the first stage? Because, you know, normally a pine tree is between 28 and 38 years, of its normal life. But it's no solution now. We've got to find a way forward. But I was just curious about that.
Yeah, so it was definitely left for a reason, and it was because it was extremely difficult, and people have kind of put it off until we can't put it off any longer. And some of it we can't harvest. So and the other thing is those forests were planted over a short period of time, and inevitably when we harvest, the age spreads. So we generally start harvesting a bit young, and then and it kind of gets spread out, and they end up harvesting a bit old at the other end. so that you don't get massive areas cleared all in one go, like what's happened in Gisborne, I guess. So that, you know, to minimise the amount that's clear cut at one time, and also just, it was all first rotation, so building roads to get to it all, you know, it takes some time. So that's kind of why it's got spread, but definitely that catchment got left because it was just so difficult. Yeah. So I agree, if we could turn back time, potentially should have dealt with it 20 years ago when they were young, the bullet. But at that stage, we didn't have a heavy lift chopper option so much.
So I'm interested in the spraying option, because I would have, as soon as you said that, I'm thinking, boy, there's some risk there, because when these trees die off, they're gonna fall, and you only just, that catchment's so damn steep, everything's gonna congregate at the bottom, and we have a problem in this region in the Rangitaiki with the I don't know if you've got some of your forestry, I presume you have. Where the big three storms, 204, 207 and 219 or whatever it was, 7,000 tonnes each time of big logs came down into the Matahina Dam, and that saved the lower Rangitaiki and the likes of Edgecombe, because if those logs had gone through Edgecombe, they would have, probably lost lives. But this really is a wicked problem for forestry, and this region, along with Gisborne, there's some major issues. And is there seriously a way out for us on this as a society?
Well, I worry about Gisborne. They've got a much larger estate on much higher risk geology. The bulk of the Bay of Plenty is actually suitable for forestry in terms of the parts, and even the geology up here is straight it's steep. So, but in terms of the poisoning, yes, they will break down over time. They're unlikely to, as I said, blow over whole. But if you seen poison trees, they tend to break down from the smallest bits, the tips and the branches, and they the finer material, and they gradually just kind of fritter back. So hopefully the bulk of it will stay on the hill, but from time to time something will slide down onto the road, as is happening already. That's what Waka Kotahi said. Well, there's already material coming down to the road from time to time out of the native road bed. I mean, they've cut a highway across the top of a very, very steep slope, so it's material coming down.
So
the least bad of the bad options.
Is there an ability to have log dams built to protect?
Not on that slope. The one thing in our favour is there's not gullies along that face. They're flat faces, because when you get gullies and they bunch up and you get water running, that you get water personally.
So I've got questions from Councillor Shirley, Campbell, White, Councillor Leader, Chairman Leader, and Nees at this stage, Sally. So.
Well, okay. Where do we start?
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for that presentation, Sally. I think the real issue and message is the prudent planting, the unsuitability of that site, and as we've said, the steep and saltstones, mudstones of East Cape are just unsuitable in many instances. But as you're probably aware, this planting was actually subsidised heavily by the government. There were forestry encouragement grants from the Forest Service and Department of Maori Affairs, massive input to clear the land and to plant it. And East Cape was the same with the Forest Service. And I guess it was with Caxton's involvement, it was actually a pulpwood regime, presumably. So the value was never there to justify the extraction in any event. And then it comes back to the distance from the port or the mill, which is always a challenge for forestry, which leads me to the substantive issue, and that's this decades-old tension between pastoral farming and forestry. Historically, forestry has been forced onto lands that could not be used for pastoral farming because of the lobby of federated farmers over the years, and there's that ongoing tension. And we see it all around the country, and trees actually grow better on prime dairy land in many respects. So how do you see that being resolved in terms of the sensible sites for planting, having a tree crop versus a patch of cabbages, because that's all tree crop is, it's just a long-term patch of cabbages. How do we actually resolve that tension between land use types in your view?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, isn't it?
Because it relates directly to this sort of.
Hang on, and right now, the conversation is completely contradictory, that we don't want debris movement and we don't want erosion and all the effects of it, but we don't want forestry on good land or productive land. And absolutely, it's cheaper, more productive, and way better environmentally to be on better country. Absolutely, and forestry companies, after what's happened in Gisborne, are backing right out. So, and in terms of new afforestation, so yeah, we've got a challenge right now. I was around in Tukaroa in 10-15 years ago when our forests were being converted to farmland, and there was a similar outcry that because of the water quality and biodiversity impacts and climate change, I guess, as well. So it does seem a bit crazy that we've suddenly flipped to afforestation being
Whakamaru stuff and all that.
Yeah, and we're all very conscious of what's happened in the cyclones. I think everybody did see the planting in Gisborne as having been a success until we got hit with that succession of cyclones, and now suddenly it's not.
We had Bowler in '87, you know,
yeah, and a lot of that planting was in response to Bowler, and those catchments were a mess after Bowler, and so they saw planting to be the answer. But I in some instances, I just think we've overestimated the ability of plantation forestry to hold really, really erodible land together, and probably push the boundaries in New Zealand as to what's productive use. In that case, on the other side, the root cause of all that really, if you could turn back time, was to not clear about a native. And I think that I'm told the government geologist warned against clearing it, that it's butt sweeping the native, and that's never.
Geological Survey did a major report saying don't plant that land.
Yeah, don't clear it, and don't clear it in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
So-
it was taxpayer subsidies, they actually cleared it and planted it.
So, and on that side, I think probably the government has a role in what happens next, but yeah. But on this side, the scale of the problem is less, but also the other key driver for the planting up the coast was employment. It's important to our landowners now. They're constantly reminding us. So, you know, it's that balance as well. And it's also now second rotation. So our goal is to retire it back to a more resilient forest, and possibly won't be any less economic, because by retiring the really tough, you're getting rid of the stuff that costs you $2 to make $1 kind of thing.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you very much, Chair. I happened to have driven that road about 6:30 the night before that incident, and it wasn't even raining. It's amazing that the amount of water and debris that did come down there on the Sunday. I guess where I have a concern is in the going forward now, who has the responsibility or who has the liability should anybody come to a blow in the future? Is it PGF Bolton? Is it landowners? Is it Waka Kotahi?
If they're hit by driving on the road.
Bottom line.
Yeah, I guess that's always the issue, isn't it? Because, you know.
I mean, it's not just there. There's a lot of other places. I can go down to our
Fidelity. Last week in Gisborne, wasn't there? Somebody drove into it, stuff like that. Yeah. So I until now, I guess, if a slip comes down on a highway, it's kind of act of God, isn't it? As opposed to being.
But if there's some forestry operations there and managed forestry operations, it might be more than just an act of God when it comes to a courtroom, that's all.
Yeah. No, and there's no question that video was very confronting. It's all very well coming out the next day. We were saying, and you know, seeing a pile of debris and clean up, but actually seeing it happen, energy and.
I couldn't believe it. I rang Councillor Winters because I'd been down in Waihau Bay with him the night on the Saturday, fishing club and the rest of it, and the Evie down there. And I sort of skated for home one at about 4:30, and I ran into rain at a Potiki, so it wasn't raining there at 6:30 at night.
Yeah.
It all happened, and that's the intensity that must have been there, because there's a hell of a lot of water that come down there. It's just Yeah, quite frightening, really.
Okay.
So I was just gonna say on that liability one though, that's a challenge for us. If we can see a risk building, do we get involved and try to reduce it by as soon as you put a chainsaw cut on a log, so there is a certain amount of pressure to not do anything, but we just felt it wasn't the right.
I have the same concerns as councillor Van Delson. It's just a bit of where you go from here.
Okay, Taru, you're online, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm assuming Manulife is Hancock mentioned that under another name, or was it a subsidiary of Hancock? That's the first question.
What happened? Yeah, and we're universally known in New Zealand as Manulife because that's what it looks like. But Manulife bought Hancock Natural Resource Group about 20 years ago.
Oh.
And so it's always been our parent company. They're based in Canada and they're a big investment insurance company. And for whatever reason, a couple of years ago, they decided it was time that we got rebranded. So nothing else has changed.
Okay, I'm familiar with Hancock's and a number of others, been in Māori forestry for quite some time, of land trusts and corporations. And I, on one hand, you've got the forest management companies managing the forests. You've got the Māori land has been leased. And to Haupoto Te Puia Trust is pretty characteristic of the relationships between Māori landowners and forest managers and forestry companies. Usually a lease, and I'm assuming with this particular forest block, you're in the second rotation, given you planted in 1970. And often these are 3 rotation blocks, and a lot of Māori land is starting to come back. Leases are expiring, and the reality of Māori land, as you know, there's a lot of it that came back, and the 5% they own is in class 5, 6, 7 land. So land best suited to trees. So it's not, and the only way they could make their economy actually work is to actually open up that land for being leased for forestry, because they were hunted for forestry at that time. And so that's why all of those trees are on that type of land. And the problem with the East Coast, the same thing. A lot of that land is Māori owned land. So my question really comes back to the fact that, what is the position of the Haupoto Te Puia Trust? Because there are a number of Māori land blocks in a similar position now around the liabilities around all of this. They've still got another rotation going. What is the position of Māori land trust? Because this is quite characteristic, and I'm asking you that. That's my question to you.
So their position is not, I can't speak for them, but they've made it clear they want us to deal with these legacy issues and not leave them with something when the lease expires. So manage, where trees have been planted in the wrong location, deal with them now while we can. And they've been supportive, haven't they, Ruben, in terms of retirement of areas? I don't think the Haupoto Te Puia Trust will push back if we've recommended areas be retired. So they've been supportive of that. They have a lot of input to the point that they were involved in decisions around cleanup. Collective decision making as to what we do, and they were also involved in the decision around poisoning. We talked through the options and collectively agreed that was the best option.
Just a final comment. I think they probably have very little choice, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we're very, very conscious of our landowners and doing the right thing by them in the longer term, and leaving them with something better than we started.
Thank you, Taru. Jim.
Thank you. My question is, who pays? So I think the economic reality here is the situation you face in a lot of places, not just the East Coast, is it's going to get worse before it gets better. Because you mentioned fallers. Fallers are becoming redundant, really due to the health and safety restrictions and barriers that are put in front of people. So you're going to move to tethers harvesting. Tethers have their limit, and their limit is well below what you're dealing with here. So you're going to have a whole lot of redundant trees. You're not going to have the skill set in terms of fallers. So that's one issue. The other issue is, it sounds ideal that you're going to replant a whole lot of natives. I think you need to revisit that in terms of natural revegetation, because that's the way you're going to do it. Because who's going to walk around those sort of slopes, 40, 45 degrees, and do all the releasing and the cost that's associated with that? And as Ruben said, what's going to happen is the natural regeneration of all the seedbed for the plantation forestry is going to beat your natives. And who's going to go in there and clear fell the saplings or whatever, so your natives get ahead of it? Because this is not chicken feed cost. This is high intensity physical activity that someone's going to have to pay for. And there will be a limit from Manulife in terms of you can't just keep feeding something without a revenue stream attached to it.
So, I had to write the question because I was starting to get. For a start, we're not planning to plant it in native. It will be natural regen of native. So definitely the issue is dealing with the radiata regen, absolutely, because otherwise that will beat it. In other parts of the forest on the steep slopes, we've had above the Motu River, we've retired right to the top of the hill, and there's some regen, radiata regen, but not so bad in that area. It really has regenerated quite well in native. Other stands that we didn't replant are almost thick. They're probably higher stocking rate than a planted stand. So in terms of who pays, it is Taumata Plantations is the client. They've got a big asset. They own Kinleith Forest in the South Waikato. So we are just lucky that they can stay the course and invest out here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty with no return, because other parts of the estate are paying for it. It's the reality. And if they'd had a choice, I don't believe they wouldn't have bought those leases. It was just that was a liability that came with a large asset. So and they have been paying, so they paid for all of the cleanup. And they are very concerned that we manage the next steps to reduce the risk out there. In terms of falling, that's a good point. I mean, we started the safety initiative to kind of really push the tethered falling, and it is too steep in the main in that forest for tethers. So pretty much all of the harvesting and Hope Portal has been manual
That was the last piece that was, yep, that's
manual fall. And it's a good point. In 30 years' time, is manual falling going to be acceptable? We do still have manual fallers in our operations, but yeah, there are a lot less than we did have in the past. So it's a good point.
Final question, Councillor Neves.
Thank you, Sally, for an interesting and informative presentation. My question is, if you spray the forest without changing climate, what is the risk of wildfire? And what would you do to manage the fire should it happen? Because it might be a way of getting rid of those trees quite quickly, but also quite a negative.
It has been thought about.
Negative impact on our air. So can you give me some sort of
the fire risk of poisoning the trees? I actually don't know in terms of once they've lost their needles and they're breaking down. I mean, there is that situation in a lot of places when you look around, isn't there, of native forest with dead exotic trees in it, Putuaki, for example. And I guess if there's fire, we will deal with it. We're part of the fire response. But I don't know that it will necessarily be higher fire risk than if they're alive. And certainly over time, it removes that.
There's as much what fire risk is within the winter that's behind.
And I guess the native itself. Yeah. I don't know that necessarily poison trees will be a higher risk. But I'm not a fire expert. I can ask how fire goes.
So, thank you, Sally and Reuben. The final question from me is, we have new national policy statements now on forest harvesting.
Yes.
One of the recommendations is that all logs have to be removed now if they are over 2 metres long. How are you going to deal with that?
Yeah, so that is a challenge. On an easy block, you can get, so it's residual slash, which is harvesting waste down to 15 cubes if it's more than 2 metres long and 10 centimetres. On an easy block, that is achievable. And the issue is here was wind blow, which is not actually harvesting slash. It's not harvesting waste, but it will definitely lead to some conversations with your compliance staff around, if we've got situations where we just can't remove it, what the options are. I think if we really can't get it out, we're going to need resource consents to authorise it, but that's going to be a different conversation. So it's definitely putting the pressure on in terms of what debris you leave remaining on a block, and probably arguably that's not Yeah, it's going to cause some challenges, that's for sure.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the presentation today. Hear by the questions around the room, this is a big concern, not just for the Bay of Plenty, but for the whole of New Zealand. We've seen the effects in Gisborne, and again, just last week, again, bridges that have been replaced have been blown out again. And I think we're not out of the woods yet, no pun intended. We're not out of the woods yet. So can I suggest there's really good conversations between our staff and your staff to make sure the comms is open?
Absolutely. And I think if we turn back time, I think one of the things we would have done differently is in terms of the decision making to harvest that stand involving the council. The council is definitely involved in terms of auditing it and
Yeah, we are.
and notified, but even involved in the decision making. Yeah. And and they have, as opposed to Gisborne where they don't.
So thank you for coming in today, Reuben, Sally. Been a pleasure to have you here, and we wish you well in your endeavours because we're going to be watching you. You know, this is not
envy you.
No,
Understand.
it's got to be easier things to do.
Actually, the whole of New Zealand is watching you. We can't keep doing what we're doing the same. Okay, on that note, thank you for your presentation. People, I just have to go back and we just need somebody to move and second all the reports, all the presentations we've had in up till now. So moved by Councillor Thurston, seconded by Councillor McMillan, that we received the presentations this morning. All those in favour, please say aye. Motion carried. Right, thank you, Sally. Reuben.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
To Chairperson's report before we have a cup of tea. Being presented, this is on page 20, Chairperson's report. And we've got some really interesting, more interesting topics to talk about, Reuben. And the first one up is the golden clams. Mr. Ingle, we have new cans, controlled area notices for the prevention of these clans. And I'm going to ask Hamish to come up, or biosecurity, or, yep, come up, Greg.
Actually, I'll let the experts do the talk.
Right. You've got the team here today, Greg and Hamish. Perfect. You're out of the hot seat. So, Greg, more cans for golden clams. And Hamish, give us an update on that Mediterranean fanworm. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Controlled area notices. So MPI have in the last month issued 2 new controlled area notices. The first one was issued over the Te Aroha Rotorua Lakes. This controlled area notice requires any vessel or any gear that has been used in the Waikato River must be cleaned before it is used in the Rotorua Lakes. And there's a special requirement around Lake Okataina, where any vessel gear must be cleaned immediately prior to entering that lake. So it's a slightly different tweak there. MPI have negotiated the use of the wash place on Tenai Row as their key washdown place for vessels to use. And we've been working with them with our self-certification app to make sure that we've got a QR code there. So when vessels have used that, they scan the code, and then we've got knowledge of the fact that they have that they've used that facility. The second controlled area notice was issued just last week and is actually probably a lot stronger for protecting us and other water bodies across the North Island. So this one is over the Waikato River system where the clams are present, and it requires that any vessel or fishing gear or any gear that's being used on that river has to be cleaned immediately after it's being used. And the second part of that applies to boats that are capable of taking on ballast water. So these are specifically wakeboarding type vessels. Those vessels now can only be used, if they've been used on the Waikato River, they cannot be used anywhere else in New Zealand. So it's quite a big control that's been put in place. It's probably one of the strongest uses of controlled area notices to date.
So we're going to get into Dobber Boatian, what happens to that boatie if they breach that can? In terms of those wakeboard boats?
Yeah, so just because of restrictions around the Biosecurity Act at the moment, we can't use things like infringement notices. So the only hardline enforcement action is prosecution. However, the penalties are really high. So if someone is found guilty of breaching that, it's breach of Section 52 of the Biosecurity Act and the controls of the Controlled Area Notice. And the penalties there are potential imprisonment or up to $100,000 fine.
Oh, right. Okay.
So there is significant penalties there available through a prosecution approach. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Hamish, Mediterranean fan found some.
We did. So we got a tip off from Dave Culliford from Weohomai, who runs the Marine Biosecurity dive school there, and noted one found in Pilot Bay in the western end there by the wharf. So the dive team shot out and did a whole heap of surveillance in there and found 81 on the seafloor. We've obviously been managing Mediterranean fanworm in Tauranga Moana for 10 years now, and numbers have dropped off quite significantly. We haven't sort of found any, do a lot of surveillance in the harbour. So from first look at it, I sent it off to the fanworm that were noted there. A few of them looked like they had been attached to something, like a boat hull. Quite hard to tell, and even harder to determine which boat it came off, given we've got upwards of 20,000 boats in the water and over the whole of New Zealand. I sent photos and videos off to Northern Regional Council, I work with up there, and Cawthron and Niwa. They sort of thought it looked a little bit like it had come off a boat. The previous incursion we had at Demolition Wharf by the container wharf there in the port of Tauranga, those definitely were scraped off a boat. You could see that there was some scraping, some steel, that obviously whoever had done it had decided they were going to go really hard and scrape off part of the hull as well. This one looked a little bit different, and the spot where we found it there in Pilot Bay is an eddied sort of area where the currents sort of circulate around. It could potentially be a spot where fanworm would settle as larvae, although over the last couple of years we haven't found much fanworm, so there's not the cycle happening. So that sort of more points us towards a vessel owner that's come in there, found a nice quiet spot and scraped the fanworm off. Yeah. The media release went really well.
Do you think you've got it contained in that area?
Yeah, well, with the team have spent 3 days. We're quite lucky because we can just launch everything at it, and our dive team just get in there and do the job. We have the underwater scooters which help as well, so they can go for longer periods of time. When we first cleaned it all up, I think the first couple of days we're finding 15 to 20 each day. But the last run they did through there, they found 1. So then they've got another 2 days next week. They're in the lakes at the moment. And yeah, I mean, good visibility in there, quite easy terrain to check because it's mostly sand, shell.
Good visibility.
Good visibility. The great white sharks aren't hanging around as much, so that's handy. Yeah, so I guess next week we'll determine how it's gone. We had a similar situation in Demolition Wharf where we found 750 fanworm about before that looked like they'd been scraped off, and we cleared all of that up and haven't seen any fanworm in there for 2 years. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing because we were heading down to almost no sites found. Yeah.
Just another question from me is, last week there was a cruise ship turned around Was that our call or was that Biosecurity New Zealand?
That's all border control, so it's definitely Biosecurity New Zealand's camp. It's interesting in that one made the media because a lot of people were affected by that, but it hasn't been unusual. In fact, MPI have issued nearly 500 notices of direction against incoming vessels over the last 3 years. But this one is probably a little bit more disappointing for MPI because they've worked really hard with the cruise industry over the winter months to make sure that they are aware of our craft risk management system, which manages the biofouling risk of vessels coming into the country. So that P&O were well aware of the requirements. They were just hoping that when they got here, they would be able to clean the vessel just off the 12-mile limit, which would allow that vessel to enter ports into New Zealand, but the weather conditions when they arrived prevented that from happening. So the company probably have to have a good hard look at themselves, really.
Councillor Scott?
Yeah, I just want to follow up. So what are the processes? So anyway, as long as it's outside the 12-mile limit, they can clean, and what are the rules around making sure that it doesn't sort of flow back to the coast? And what are the...
Yeah, so outside 12-mile limit, I'm not an expert on this, but it's international waters. Basically, we've got no controls over what they do outside that 12-mile limit.
And how is it to ensure it's being done well?
So the craft risk management system standard specifies everything that's required of it. It's quite a lengthy document, but basically when vessels they should be independently checked for their biofouling. That's all got to be documented, including photos. That's all then submitted to MPI, which then just look through the biofouling management of that vessel, and then they risk assessment. They do risk assessments of those vessels, and vessels of high risk are checked prior to actually entering the country, and vessels which have got well documented biofouling management systems in place are given a lot freer access to the country. But they've got to provide the documentation to prove what they've done.
Councillor McMillan?
Oh yeah, I'm really interested in citizen science and us being able to grow that opportunity for citizens to get involved and have some kind of ownership and passion for citizen science. And I was wondering with the Mediterranean fan worm, whether moving forward there might be an opportunity. I mean, it was per chance that got spotted. That may have happened anyway since they dive there regularly. But could we, is there an opportunity here to involve our community to have not only monitoring of marine native species, but perhaps looking out for marine invasive species? And what does that look like? Is there an opportunity there? I don't know who I'm looking at. Maybe one of the GMs. I'm not sure, but
I'd say there is an opportunity, and I suppose the approach from Biosecurity New Zealand and us by association there has been a little bit old school. Listen, there is an 0800 number for reporting things. There's fact sheets and guidance available through websites and things like that. So it's kind of a little bit old school in that approach. We haven't looked into it about how get a system in place for marine space. We have been looking at it for our terrestrial space through our Open Weeds data platform, which allows community groups and others to provide weed information into us. So we have started to dabble in that space, but I suppose we haven't looked at it in the marine space, have we?
I think it could be an awesome opportunity, and I think there's certain boaties or divers or snorkelers or swimmers that would relish the idea of kind of having a job to do, and that's like really actually I'd love us to kind of have some kind of looking into that idea.
Thanks.
Councillor Nees?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just about the golden clam, what is going to be our approach? And you may not be able to answer this, Greg, but how are we going to monitor for a breach of the Waikato can notice of boats that might have come over from the Waikato? What are we thinking about with regard to checking on the boats that are on our lakes in Rotorua this season? Check that they haven't come from the Waikato.
So we do have compliance around our Rule 7, which in effect is a pathway rule which kind of helps with gold clam. But if you recall back to, I think it was our August strategy and policy when we talked about gold clam there, we got clear direction about supporting EPI's actions around this. So we've been doing that, and we've looked at how we could reallocate some of our funding to strengthen some of the boat ramp compliance. But that is focused on our RPMP rule, which is not directly focused on gold clams. It's about a more generalist approach. But in saying that, our Rule 7 is probably the strongest pathway management rule in New Zealand at the moment.
So you will have to be asking people if they can prove that they are in their boat at Waikato?
So we do ask people when we're doing the boat ramp checks about where the boat was last used. Obviously, they don't have to provide that information to us.
Tiara Lakes Trust will have a number of staff out at boat ramps this summer, Greg.
So we
working on that very thing.
Yeah, we contract Tiara Lakes Trust to provide that boat ramp compliance and self-certification checks.
I have another question, but it doesn't relate to an item.
No, I just wanted to make sure we were had focused on the golden clams and that fanworm, and so hence the discussion. But I'm happy to take questions on the chair's report. But Councillor Thurston
on golden clamming, okay?
No, on golden clams.
So, Greg, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your level of fear with all the boaty movements coming up for the Christmas period at Tarawera and Okaraka and all the out-of-towners, all the Waikato folk moving out to their batches and their droves? What's your level of fear on a scale of 1 to 10? This is actually going to hit us.
I'd hate to give it a 1 to 10, but I'd sit there and say I'm really concerned.
High level of concern.
High level of concern, yeah. The movement of the adults is probably less of a risk. They're quite obvious, but their larval form, they're microscopic. They can survive in a droplet of water for many, many days. The larvae have a little wee kind of a sticky tentacle to them which can stick to stuff. Easy to move around, yeah.
So would you go so far as to say it's not a case of if but when?
I would hate to say that, but I suppose in reality it would be a very hard thing to stop from spreading.
Okay. Back to Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Yes, it's just an item about the mapping tool released by Greenpeace.
John?
No, it's not in your report. That was my note. It's another item. I thought this is the only area, unless you take it as this item.
No, go.
Okay. So they've released this mapping tool, which is called Know Your Nitrate. And so basically it maps the nitrate levels in water across the country.
Yeah.
And what it shows is a coloured hexagon all across the country where nitrate levels are high in the water, in the groundwater. And obviously the performance was in Canterbury where the nitrates have reached extreme levels of risk for cancer causation. But in the Bay of Plenty, we have generally low nitrate concentration, but there's a couple of areas which actually are showing significant levels. My concern is about the data that's been used for this. So, for example, there's an elevated level of 6.81 milligrams per litre in Kaharoa, which indicates a 24% increased risk of cancer. And then another one, out in the Waiari, where there's a 20% increased risk because it's 5.68 milligrams per litre in the water. My problem is that the Kaharoa issue data comes from 2007 and it was only one sample. The Waiari one was the last measurement was 2019 and it was only for 4 samples. So what can we do to provide more up-to-date data? I mean, they do have some sites that have got up-to-date data. Some of the sites have got the 2022 results, but I'm really concerned that, you know, somebody goes into that, they look and they say, oh, they go deep dive into the data and don't actually see how elderly it is. It's not current and it's only from a very small sample. I just wonder if we could check that out and see if there's something we can do about that.
I think that's a Rob Client's question, Councillor Ness, but I'll certainly take that away and see what we.
Councillor Shirley and then Blondell.
I've seen that.
So we're talking about the Chair's report, anything on the
I
Chair's?
was talking about going to the Greenpeace thing. It's really sensationalism to say that nitrates cause cancer. It's only nitroamines that cause cancer, and nitrates don't automatically go to nitroamines. It's quite complex. The real health danger of nitrates is methemoglobinemia, which is blue baby syndrome. It only affects infants in the first 3 months. So that whole nitroamines thing is really sensationalisation, in my view.
Councillor Von Delson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, bringing this issue to this table is dangerous. The Greenpeace's report, because you know, we are an organisation that squarely bases on good science, or we should, and I don't want to get it in the record. You know, I think it's something for our staff to look at, but we certainly. I've got questions as to that validity of that report myself, but I don't, and I think so. I don't want it as part of our, so that we have to do something, but it's something that we should be talking to staff to make sure that our science is robust. That's all, and so I'm just worried. That's exactly what Greenpeace wanted, is for us, the like regional councils around the country, to be talking about their report, and it's
it only came out a couple of days ago. So we can ask our staff to delve a deep dive through and into the report, and probably next year we sort of do something on the table. I'm not going to discuss it anymore today because I think it's early days and yeah. Right. Any other questions on the chairperson's report? Sorry, was that you, Paula? Did you have a question? No. Okay, any other questions on chairperson's report?
Yeah, I'm just on a happier note, you know, with the winter months now past us, I think it's appropriate that we send some form of acknowledgement to the staff who've been engaged in enforcing the air quality standards in Rotorua in particular the compliance staff. It's not easy, and they're now dealing with a real hard to get low income cohort, and I think it's been brilliant how they've managed it through the winter months.
So did we have a breach of the air standards in Rotorua this winter, Mr. Thurston?
I think we had one, didn't we?
I don't think we had any.
I think we had one minor one, but I may be wrong. But even so,
it's something at Ngāpuno. It was a dust. It wasn't.
But I'd just like to put out a formal acknowledgement through you, Chairman, that you know.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Any other questions on Chair's report? I'd like to move that Chair's report be received, seconded by Councillor Thurston. The discussion, all those in favour, please. Aye. Against, carried. Moving on to the compliance activity report on page 29.
Chairman, you did rush through there a little bit. The customer satisfaction survey is one that interests me, that we only had 73 responses when we look at and they're all saying how well we are, but when you look at the number of reports, of sense in that we staff go, I thought 73 was a pretty poor sample. Either way.
It's a voluntary,
Everybody.
yeah. If people choose not to participate,
Understand that, but for us, as an organisation that believes in efficiency and effectiveness and making sure that we're customer centric, we might need to look at ways to actually get better participation. Because, you know, as councillors, we generally only hear the bad feedback. And we still do get, I do get a bit of reaction from people ring me up and talk to me about things. And as we all, and we deflect that and support our staff. And I think staff really up their game in this area, and I congratulate them for it. But but it's somehow we need our community. We need to take our community with us. That's all.
moving on to the, oh yes, sorry. So on your, what we table today was the draft report for the 2024 work program for monitoring and ops. So if you want to add a report to this, tell Amanda or myself. It's pretty much will follow the blueprint of what we did this year. There's a few spaces available, but this is pretty much the work program for next year as well, which will be part of this my chair's report. Right, moving on, compliance activity. Welcome along.
Oh, we having a couple.
Yeah. After this, Mr.
You said after the chair's report.
Well, you had a lot of questions to and Matt and Stephen can, we'll have a cup of coffee, Mr. Von Dadelson.
Yeah, be interested. Chairman, can we adjust the temperature? I think the air conditioning must be set rather. I don't know how others are feeling, but I'm just worried about our carbon footprint. That's the way it is.
Are you warm or hot?
I'm cold.
Very cold. It's up here.
That's pretty good on this side.
While Amanda's doing the changing the temperature.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Take the report as read. I'd hate to stand in the way of a cup of coffee. But maybe just a couple of little things to update. Since this report, the chair's report as well, we reported on some successful sentencing prosecutions that have come through. So just last night and last week, we've got 3 more that have come through. So 2 more water takes, unauthorised taking of water, groundwater, both fined $42,000 each. $42,000 each. And Alpine Pet Foods, the odour discharge that's been going on for a long time. We got a sentencing decision for that, and they were fined $70,000. So some really good support from
your one that you've been going on.
Yes, have they moved? Because they've gone down to
shut down. They've moved
on to the matter of 2. Let them go there.
Yeah, and just to note on that, we have been advised that most of their staff have found jobs elsewhere in the Bay Penny. So.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Am I right in getting a sense that fines and penalties have been dramatically increasing?
I think the fines, the judges have definitely been taking a lot harder line these last sentencing decisions that we've got. So these for what may have been considered less serious offences in the past. And so with the NBA, the fines did significantly increase, but we haven't taken any prosecutions under that.
Is that because we've been better at giving evidence, or is it just because that's the expected of the community now? And
Do you have any sense of that?
I think we've had some feedback from our lawyers that we're getting better at providing that evidence and providing that picture forward. So I think it's probably a combination of that and judges relying back on other settings as well.
Congratulate the staff on it.
Yeah, a 70K fine certainly, well, in fine makes you stand up and look and think, what am I doing wrong? And here's the consequences. When you're getting up and towards a 100K fine, that's really significant. Right, who had the question? Councillor McMillan and then John Daddleson.
Kia ora, thank you. I noticed on page 31 you talk about compliance results with dairy effluent discharges similar to last year, which continues a trend of decreasing compliance levels observed over the last 5 years. I mean, I get the fact that with the increased rainfall, you know, that's been an issue, but over the last 5 years, which included sort of quite dry periods as well, why? So 2 questions really. Why is that compliance declining? And what do you think the impacts of the new government policies with kind of more relaxed around, you know, letting farmers farm in inverted commas is going to impact on that outcome?
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing with the decreased level of compliance is probably related to the fact that we're getting more farmers being audited under newer consent conditions. So more stringent consent conditions, more requirements for them tougher requirements for them to meet. The significant non-compliances aren't increasing dramatically. That would be really worried about an industry fallback there, I guess. But what we're seeing is probably, I think, more stringent consent conditions, more closer monitoring by our staff when we're doing those inspections. We're making sure we're trying to be really consistent from farm to farm. Second question around the new government policy, I guess that'll take time to flow out. So again, we've got a number, like all the dairy farms in our region are under consents at the moment. So those consents won't change, those condition requirements won't change. So that'll take time to flow through into our new policies and plans.
Councillor Von Daddleson.
Yeah, page 32, you have a matrix of various levels of compliance. And I must say, I was disappointed to see that 7% of dairy farmers have significant non-compliance and 10% have moderate. I often say that 95% of farmers are really environmentally conscious and want to leave. They treat their farms as guardianship and they want to leave it better than they found it. And there's always going to be a rough edge, but that's a bit worrying to me. But then I suppose that's just one segment of farming. So we add in the sheep farms because they're very good people. And it will probably average out my stats. But thank you for putting that, because it really just zones in. And the other one that is of concern, not so many consents, but inspections, but the forestry and the moderate non-compliance of 7%. I think that the social license of forestry land is in question at the moment, and we want to make sure that we don't want to be we want to help them, not hinder them, but we need to find carrots as well as sticks to get their compliance up, because it's concerning to me that there's even a 7%. That's quite a high percentage in my view of moderate non-compliance in that sector. So just looking at the tables, I think that the other stuff it's a nice table to have a look at actually, and just see where we've got issues.
Thank you, Councillor Von Daddleson. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Just 2 questions. One, with regard to the permitted activity monitoring that you've done, and I noted that you did desktop analysis to identify which sites you were going to visit, and then we had a 21% non-compliance. Was it a random or representative sample you were trying to come up with in your selection methodology, or was it the high risk sites? Because if it was a more random or representative measure, do you think that's then the results are representative of all the permitted activity compliance across the region?
So it was mainly, it was a more targeted desktop analysis, so risk-based, and we focused on where we thought we would find that non-compliance. So a large part of that is the water take stuff, so the unconsented water take. So we look at where there are orchards with no water takes, where there are orchards with bores with no water takes is obviously a little bit of a flag for us. And they're the ones that we go and visit and sort of work our way through that list there. So where we can see, and it's easy to see on a area map, right, where we can overlay all that stuff together.
So a 21% non-compliance is actually quite a good story, because these were the ones you were suspicious about.
Yeah, I think it's a really good story. You know, we've put effort into a space where there's an issue, and and the message is starting to come out. So two of those prosecutions I talked about earlier, those $42,000 fines, were from our permitted activity.
Excellent. My other it's a request really. On page 36, we've got the service request by type. That's really interesting to see, you know, the relative amounts of odour versus land and soil disturbance. But in the future, could we see that via district as well? Like, so that you see where most of the odour ones are coming through. Are they coming through in the urban area, in the rural Tauranga?
We can certainly provide a map of where all the complaints come through, but I'd have to check and see whether we might be able to do this graph with a map just of all the complaints. I'm not sure we can do a breakdown of complaint type by district, but we'll do our best.
Thank you.
No further questions?
Great report, mate, thank you.
Somebody like to move that the report on the compliance activity be extended, moved by councillor Von Johnson, seconded by councillor McMillan. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Cup of tea.
Like lunch.
Come back. Oh, stop it. As soon as possible, because you've got a long day today. Welcome back. So we're page 39 of the agenda. Overview of municipal wastewater compliance in the Bay of Plenty region. And welcome back to Matt, who's going to present this report. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you again. Happy to take the report as read. I just want to acknowledge May's contribution to the report. She's done quite a lot of work with each of the local authorities to get on top of their wastewater treatment plants and be in compliance. I think what we're seeing in terms of compliance with the resource consents and the levels of non-compliance really relates to what was an exceptionally wet year and presented a lot of challenges to those wastewater networks in terms of how they manage that. I'm here to take any questions.
Yeah, I guess for me, page 42 stands out like the proverbial. I went straight to my own TLAs, by the way, as I hope you all went to your own local TLA and did an in-depth analysis of how it was performing. But for me, 45 for Rotorua, that's one a week in terms of network failures. I shudder to think of the environmental effect. You know, somebody was critical of the dairy industry before non-compliance, but this is just as bad. Just as bad. Yes, RDC's building a new wastewater treatment plant, higher capacity, the network failure. And for a whole lot of reasons, you know, not good enough as far as I'm concerned. So I'll be having something to say with my local TLA next time I see them. See our own councillors. So, are there any questions on Matt's report? I've had my over the day. Any questions on Matt's report? I guess it's just one of those, you know, age of the network, and it's not just us; it's right across New Zealand.
Yeah, I think we certainly asked the questions in terms of what has been done to reduce the level of those overflows, and there could be a little bit done in terms of inspections of those pipes, inspection of the network, and reducing inflow. But the cost of upgrading a number of these consents is going to be an interesting task over the next 10 years.
Sylvain Danielson.
So there's two obvious. That 42 graph is very telling, and the reasons that the numbers in both Tauranga and when you look at it per population basis, that might be a difference. It might not be out of kilter, but either way, they're both Rotorua and Tauranga are too high. What's the solution? What do the TLAs tell you they can do about it? Are they really addressing these overflows?
Yeah, I'd say they are, and I think there's no one single cause of those overflows. So there's been an increase because of wet weather and stormwater intrusion, which is a tricky one to manage. But wet wipes, those blockages in the stormwater network are really difficult to manage. Particularly in Tauranga, there's quite an education campaign around not flushing what should be flushed and understanding where that goes. And they're also where we're seeing issues with stormwater, wastewater overflows, and hotspots, they will target for inspections and put cameras down those pipes and monitor them more closely. So we had one, Fraser Cove was probably one area where there were a number of issues in the past, which has reduced. I'm confident that where there are issues arise at hotspots that they can address them.
Councillor Crosby?
The answer to that, I was a little surprised because they have gone to a lot of work. They spent 20 million on the Southern Pipeline. Rather than stop this, particularly when it rained a lot. So did weather have a lot to play with this year's performance? Because, you know, it did rain a lot.
Yeah. So in particular, those short intense downpours part of it. So I would say that that's a significant contribution in terms of why we're seeing that leap previous years.
Why a lot of work on gully trap innovation as well. So it'll be interesting, Chair, to see year on year what the trend is.
If we're going to have a dry summer.
What the factors are that are driving. You know, one overflows, one is too many, I think.
Okay, no further questions to Matthew. Would somebody like to move that the report be received? Councillor Von Danielson, seconded by Councillor Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Thank you, Matthew. Moving on to Mount Maunganui Industrial Area Update. So we've got Stephen, Shane, and I see Reese is online. Hi, Reese. Yep. Welcome back, Stephen. It's on page 105.
Yep, hello again, councillors. This is another of our regular updates for the Mount Maunganui Industrial Area. In this report, we tried to kind of highlight how many different work streams across council feed into this report and how busy we are. I still feel as though we're on a positive trajectory as far as discharges and the air quality goes, and a lot of hard work behind the scenes to get us to where we are today. I'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions, like Shane from science, Glenn from data management, and Reese can cover anything for the working party.
Okay, any questions I have a question. So Graham Marshalls from the Working Party, chair of the Working Party, is retiring, calling it quits.
So that's the case.
We had a conversation yesterday with Tauranga City Council commissioners and the our councillors who have been involved in that working party, looking at what next year will look like.
Yep.
I think the consensus from that was that another good independent chair is needed, and perhaps a little bit of a refresh of that working party to make it ground zero, I think, and forward focused.
Okay.
Chair.
Councillor Von Danielson.
Yeah, on page 129, Graham Marshall's comments are noted in there, and I think, you know, he has, I'd like to, on behalf of the regional council, send a note to him recognising the work he's done as chair of that. I think he's actually brought the parties together exceptionally well. It's a very vexed issue, and it's highly emotive. And the thing we have to ensure, and any of our people that are on it, is that we do use a best science basis for decision making, you know, even for discussion. And the comments there about Graham said, I think, are really pertinent.
Yep.
So
you're happy to
I'd like a letter or something to.
We can add that as a number 2, that we send a letter of acknowledgement to Graham Marshall.
Yeah, I think that was
regional council for the work he's done, bringing that group together, and thank him for his work. Yep, we can add that. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just about the sealing of yards and the potential improvements that might help deliver, how long before we will start to see that being able to be enforced, and we'll be able to start seeing some improvements?
I can probably provide some information on that, councillor Nees. The work program has obviously started now. The instruction was given by the court through their interim decision. So with staff, Mark Hamilton's leading that piece of work out of the planning area. So he's already been out there engaging with those property owners that fall under that criteria. They've been running a couple of drop-in sessions over the last couple of weeks around that. I understand the attendance has been quite low, which is maybe not surprising, although given that there's strong direction from the court, you would have thought that some of those property owners would have been quite interested in being informed as to what it's going to mean for them. One of the complexities is that quite often the property owner is not always on site, and the site could be leased, so you could be dealing with several parties on each particular property. So it is a work program that has started. The dates I don't recall exactly, but it's pretty short and concise really. The instruction was given by the court, and I think it's early next year that things really start happening.
All right, right, all right.
Yeah, so Shane's correct, completely correct, Councillor News, that submission period will be early new year, and then the court will need to make decisions based on those about what all provisions get put in.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Crosbie.
But just an observation report, which I think I want to highlight, is that the focus is not just about compliance, the focus is about reducing the particulates in the air, because I get a bit worried that, oh, we've had one maybe exceedance, or it's all good. Well, it's not all good. So I'm delighted to hear that that's the culture in the working party, that it is to reduce on a continual basis the particulates in the air, no matter where they come from, as best as possible.
Yeah, and Councillor Crosbie, note this financial year, there's been no breaches so far. You know, that's the reduce. We can't rest on our laurels in terms of
Correct. There is, of all the issues I get feedback on, this is probably where I live for most heightened one, despite, you know, all the good work today, and there is a lot of good work today. You know, the residents in certain areas of Mount Maunganui are still getting in their homes quite significant particulate matter, call it what you like. It worries them because they don't know what it is.
I suppose when you get those complaints, Stuart, do you log them with our team?
No, these are just conversations, you know, with some of them are in the group and interested people. So it's not a specific time and place issue. You know, we did deal with one a long time ago, which has been ongoing by the airport, but that's sort of resolved. No, these are just the general concern around residents, particularly the proximity to some schools right on the boundary, as an example.
Any further discussion on the report for industrial area update? No, if not, just on. Sorry, Reece.
Councillor Winter, if I could just come in through the chair, I would just like to table a correction to the report under part 2.3, the Mount Air Quality Working Party. The paragraph there from Leonard Sampson, Port of Tauranga, we have a sentence saying in excess of 60 billion in annual export revenue, which is incorrect. And I would just like the minutes to note this should be changed to 30 billion of annual export revenue across three key commodities, being logs, dairy and kiwi fruit, is what that sentence should read.
Noted. Thank you, Reece. Yeah, it looked a bit out of place, but now we know. Thank you. Any further questions? Would somebody like to move that the Mount Maunganui Air Quality Mount Maunganui Industrial Area Update be received?
And done.
Thank you, Councillor.
Happy to move.
Seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Moving on to page 140, which is our regular climate change program quarterly report. And I've got Nick Newman, who will introduce our guest, Nick?
I'm delighted to present Jessica Mitchell, who's the recipient of the first recipient of the Climate Change Scholarship, the first intake of the first climate change degree in the world. So it's she's here just to quickly present to you about the degree, what she's learning, the background is, showing you what you're getting.
Welcome along, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks. I thought I would just start very briefly. Got the report starting page 140.
Yeah.
Take it as read. Take questions. I'd just like to draw your attention to a couple of things related to earlier items. There was discussion earlier about the need for courageous conversations in our community around climate change adaptation. They're starting and they're being led by the community and supported. There's a couple of examples in the paper there. In particular, at Waihi Beach, I just want to commend the partnership with Western Bay Plenty District Council, Emergency Management Bay of Plenty, Surf Life Saving New Zealand, and the community board there around that project has been a tremendous example of what can be achieved. So happy to take questions, and then we can hear from Jessica.
Any questions on the report? Councillor McMillan?
Oh, I just wanted to congratulate you on the climate adaptation network. That's really exciting, and I don't think I was quite aware of what that encompassed. And so it looks like that's going to kind of grow bigger and bigger legs. And you noted here transition to an incorporated society next year. And so I'm really excited to see where that goes. So thank you. So it's not really a question, but just a comment. Thanks.
Councillor Nees?
Thank you. In the attachment to your report, the program overview, there's a mention of circular economy work and the work with businesses undertaken by Bay of Connections. What if that funding isn't ongoing to Bay of Connections, what do you think will happen in the circular economy and business space in the Bay of Plenty? Do you think there will be somebody else that will be able to step into that, fill that gap, a sustainable business network or a sustainable Bay of Plenty, or will it just lapse for lack of?
I think there's momentum there now with the territorial authority, especially in the Western Bay. And priority one. I guess that connector role is really important in helping to make that happen across the Bay. And in terms of funding, I couldn't comment on it in terms of where other people are, but I think it's something that's got momentum there that people are buying into that needs to keep being nurtured.
Thank you.
No further questions on the report. This report. Yes,
Sorry, I just want one more. I can't remember where we talked about this, but we were talking about our role in education with climate change, and just in terms of our regional parks and our opportunity there to incorporate some key messages around climate change, behaviour, science, things like that. I just want to put it out there on the radar that since we've got those assets, for want of a better word, it could be an opportunity for education. So I'd like to explore that maybe in the future.
Thank you. That was the LTP discussion about.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jess, your turn.
You just advance.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa ko Ingarangi Rua ko Arana, te whakapaparangi mai rā ko Essex te whānau tapu, e noho ana au ki te takitaki mobile, ko Mitchell te whānau. Kia ora everyone, thank you for having me today. My name is Jess Mitchell. I'm originally from the UK, grew up in Essex, just outside London. Been in New Zealand about 9 years and currently living in the Mount. so that goes cool. So I'm a student, one of the first of the students in the Bachelor's of Climate Change. So it started, it's with the University of Waikato, and I started it in March 2021. So I'm just heading into my third year next year. And what that means is, normally there's sort of Bachelors of Science or Arts. So the actual core of it is all centered around climate change papers, which is super interdisciplinary. And we cover everything from climate science, policy, arts, Indigenous studies, adaptation, mitigation, modelling, a whole range through the middle. And you can match with a wide range of majors and minors. So I have chosen to major in geography. I really enjoy reconnecting to our natural space and understanding people and place. And I minor in strategic management. So my previous background, when I was younger, my dad said if I didn't know I was going to study, I should go and get a job. So I did that, and I fell into accounting. So I have 10 years experience in the business industry, basically, multiple different sectors, working as a management accountant, and I'm currently a business performance analyst for a nationwide logistics company. So I think it all together gives me a really good understanding of what we need to be doing to move forward for climate then. One thing I want to touch on, it's just so cool when you're in a room with people that are studying ecology, finance, law, all sorts of majors, and we've all got a climate lens on whatever it is that we're discussing. So in my application for this scholarship, it was to have a look at the action plan goals and to see what it is that I'm studying and how they align. So I find the sort of your goals 1 and 2 are on that mitigation space. I love the innovation that businesses and people come up with and how that all is really rolling in terms of wanting to bring down our emissions now. I personally feel really aligned with the 3 and the 4, which is the climate adaptation, the building community resilience, and talking more about biodiversity and making sure we don't sort of have collapses there. So I am learning that I absolutely love building relationships and communicating climate change in a real positive way. I think I really want to normalize the way that we talk about climate change, so that it's accessible for everybody and that we can decide on our best way forward. And so the scholarship means a huge deal for me. Obviously there's the financial aspect, which is amazing, since I still work part-time and study full-time. But it's really amazing to be rewarded and recognized when you're making a really big life decision of a change of career, especially into a space that's growing. And there's lots of new things to have to take on board. But one of the real positive things that have come from this is being put in the Sun Life newspaper has now brought up conversations from people I just didn't even expect heard about what it was I was doing in a whole range of circles. And that for me is a massive win, because it means we're engaging with people that otherwise it wasn't on their radar, or they were sort of ignoring it, but now they're interested in what I'm doing, the uni, yourselves, and I think that's a super positive way forward for us all. So I really want to, although I'm not born here, I have a huge connection to the Bay of Plenty, both people and place and the environment, and I want to, I'm determined to drive a positive change for us all and move into the future. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Nees and Councillor McMillan.
Well, thank you. It's probably an unfair question, but we had a presentation earlier on today, which indicated that there's possibly 10% of the population that are aware and engaged and 90% perhaps aren't. So what do you think would be the most useful approach for us to try and maximise their penetration across the community of awareness of what they can do to assist?
I think step one is really, it's a lot of the word climate and change. I mean, change is a really difficult word for a lot of people, and climate has had a lot of negative impact for a long time. So it's normalizing it. It's rather than it being a segment in a discussion, rather it being a slice in a business. It actually, we have a social lens across everything. We care for people. It should be no different for the environment. So it's massively around, if in this room climate became a sort of lens that sat across it all the time, well, that then feeds down and people see that that's a normal part of conversations rather than it's too hard or it's too scary or it's too intense. And I think this today is a really positive step forward because we are normalising it. And for me, myself and anyone I communicate with in the wider business networks and just bringing it up regularly and realising it's not a scary thing to talk about and we do have to address it. And I think everyone in here went away and sort of we did that. Then we start to sort of spread our own network.
Councillor McMillan.
Oh, I just want to say massive congratulations, and I think it's really exciting, you know, you're pioneering in this space, the first of a lot of things. I think it's really exciting for us and really exciting for you and really exciting for the Bay of Plenty. And I think it's also really awesome that you're somebody who's really confident to speak out about it. I enjoyed meeting you. I can't remember where it was, December, January.
It's like a long time ago,
Yeah. And I could see your passion back then, and I just wanted to congratulate you and say that, you know, there's a lot of people behind you that are really in full support of you getting ahead. So good on you.
Thank you.
No further questions on this report? No. Moving on, would somebody like to move that the climate change report be received? And congratulations to Jessica, and nice meeting you and keep up the good work, and look forward to your coming back and presenting us when you've finished your degree and telling us what you've learnt between when you started and now you've finished.
What is it, 4 year, 3 year?
It's a 3 year, so next year's my last year. Yeah, and thank you all very much for selecting me.
Can I move the report, please? Councillor Nees, seconded by Councillor Miller. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Each carried. Right, 8.6 Cutwater Road Wetland Project, page 151, Mr. Pym. And Claire, you are there, Claire, welcome along.
Thanks for the welcome, Mr. Chair. Claire's going to present most of the paper and then I'll come in when we get to the financial bits at the end.
Good man.
It's great to be here again, especially following on from the update in June about what we're up to in the Waihi Estuary catchment. And we just thought that this would be good timing based on the LTP workshops that have been held recently to come in and give an update on where we're at with the Cutwater Road 30 hectare bit of land and the opportunity that we've got there. So I'll take the report as read and then I'll just ask if you can hold questions at the end. So just to start off with, this is the high level design that we have come up with for the 30 hectare piece of land. And so we've proposed to split into a 10 hectare constructed treatment wetland, as you can see on the red outline, on the Pongakawa side, which will be serviced by the pink dot, which is the location of pump station 10. And then the remaining 20 hectares will be where the salt marsh habitat will be created, and we've located that on the Pukahina side to allow the best chance of connecting it directly into the estuary. There's an existing drain down the southeastern side. We're looking to hopefully create that connection, and so that will provide a really good opportunity.
Put your laser on where you're talking about. I'm sure there's a laser pointer there. There we go. There you go.
That's line down there. So that is an existing connection into the estuary as is. So there's just a small little bit there that would need to get taken out. And so we've got the blue line here. That's the historic exit point of the Pongakawa River. And so what we're proposing to do as part of this design is to maintain that historical extent of the Pongakawa River. And we had initially proposed to create some inanga spawning ponds in this 2 hectare area, but that's kind of the highest level, highest part of the 30 hectare portion that will be ideal for salt marsh creation as it is. And so we're proposing to instead shift it down to be around this historic exit to the Pongakawa and to tie in with the existing inanga ponds that I think some of you have already seen down the end. And then also have just set aside half a hectare for facilities such as car parking, etc. So we've been working really closely in collaboration with Te Wahapura Waihi, our partners for this project, and this design has been supported by the Te Wahapura board. And we've also done some initial consultation and engagement with the Drainage Society and also with Department of Conservation and also the landowners on Cutwater Road, who have indicated their support for the project, with their main caveat being that the level of service provided by the pump station can't be negatively impacted. So that's a key part of our design, one of our design concepts that has to be fulfilled for whatever we end up delivering. And so the shape of the 10-hectare treatment wetland, this is just something that I originally did with the concept, so this might end up changing to be more of an L shape, but those are the things that will be sorted out as we progress through the feasibility part of the study, which we're well underway now. So I'll move on to the next slide, which shows for the treatment wetland portion, this is the contributing catchment area that will be treated by the 10-hectare portion. And so this is in line with the NIWA guidelines that require a wetland size of between 1 to 5% of the contributing catchment. So this would be 10 hectares would be 1.62%. So that's very similar to the Bay Gold and the Hickson wetlands that I presented on back in June, and we've had really positive results coming through from the monitoring. So hoping to see similar results from this treatment wetland project. And so as you can see from this 617 hectares, that's a really significant area that will be able to be treated through this treatment wetland, which will hopefully provide some pretty significant benefits to the estuary that really needs as much help as possible. In terms of the pump station layout and how the wetland will function, pump station 11 and 10 are key. So the water from pump station 11 will be used to push the water down to the inlet of the wetland. And then pump station 10 will be used to then draw that water through the wetland before it's discharged out into the Pongakawa Canal once it's been treated. And this project will be the first time that a treatment wetland is constructed in a pumped environment. And so this will be a really key pilot study for other parts of our region as well as around the country. So there's a lot of interest already being generated by what we're doing here. As part of the feasibility study that's currently underway, they've identified that in order to get enough hydraulic head to get the water drawn through the wetland, we're probably going to need another pump station at the inlet. And so that's currently being costed and sized for what we will need for this project. And another key consideration for the treatment wetland is that we'll need to have a bund created around the edge of that to separate it from the salt marsh habitat. In terms of the salt marsh connection and how to connect that 20-hectare piece of land, we've engaged DHI to model some potential scenarios on how to do that, because they already have the detailed hydrodynamic modelling that they've previously completed for the estuary. And so they've come up with 4 key potential options for how to connect that. And so they've got these 2 diagrams here. So for the 3 open culverts or removing the stop bank along the Pukahina side, there wouldn't be any change to how the Pongakawa and the Pukahina are currently operating. But for the bottom 2 options, to create a new channel, as I talked about in that drain down on that southeastern side, they'd be looking to create a block to block off the Pukahina and then direct the flow through this new channel and into the estuary that way. And so some potential benefits from creating the new southeastern opening would be to improve the flushing in the southeastern corner of the estuary. There is mud that's accumulated. It won't create enough force to be able to erode and move away the mud that has already accumulated, but it would be enough to stop any further mud from accumulating. So it would have some real positive impacts on that portion of the estuary. And so the key 2 options that we're mainly considering based on the recommendations of that report are the 3 open culvert option and this creation of the southeastern estuary.
The last option was, which I haven't included on the slide, was to create another opening through this existing salt marsh, but we deemed that that would have too much of a detrimental impact on that existing salt marsh habitat, so we've ruled that option out at this stage. And so moving forward, some of the key things that we need to next look at is how we'll manage the salinity levels, and we need to do some further investigations with some of the model assumptions from DHI in terms of making sure that the salinity levels that end up in the 20 hectare block are within the right range to get the establishment of salt marsh species and to be able to be on top of the weeds, etc. Adequate salinity level. So that is where we're at, and so I'm going to hand over to Tim to talk about some of the costings.
Thanks, Claire. So there are some initial cost estimates here, and yesterday we received the next iteration of cost estimates from the engineering firm that we've engaged to help us out with this. They are reasonably consistent with what we've got there, and they do include the provision for a smaller scale pump at the upper end of the treatment wetland. Doesn't need to be a flood pump, it just needs to be enough to lift the volume that the wetland can treat on the volume that comes through that 600 hectare farm catchment, not the volume that would be discharged in a flood event. So as you can see, the most expensive element in the project is the treatment wetland, the 10 hectare treatment wetland. The establishment of natural coastal wetlands is relatively cost effective. I think from my perspective, it is worth us demonstrating that this treatment wetland methodology can work in a pumped environment, because it does have potential benefits in many other locations in the Bay of Plenty region as well as around the country. So I'd be keen for us to pursue the hybrid approach that's been presented to you in the council paper as the coastal wetland option. I also owe you a slight apology. When I wrote the council paper, the financial implications section, I indicated that there was a significant shortfall in funding. In actual fact, that's not the case. The shortfall exists between projects in the coastal catchments activity capital budget, not in absolute terms. So the capital budget in the current version of the LTP that's sitting in front of you is 3.9 million for 24-25. And if we go ahead with the 2.5 required to do what Claire's outlined next financial year, that will still allow us to do the other things that are on the coastal catchments activity. And the reason I say that is the Rangitaiki Reconnection project, which is the other significant project on the books for next year, is currently only partially able to proceed. You will have heard the discussion from Chris and from Kendall Smith recently. So we're only able to proceed with a small bridge at Smith Road rather than the whole project. So my proposal, Chris's proposal, is that we reallocate some of the capital from the Rangitaiki Reconnection project to allow this to occur. There will still be just under $1 million of unallocated capital within the project, within the coastal catchments activity capital budget. So we'll just leave that there. We normally go into a financial year with scope to build smaller treatment wetlands, detainment bunds that get consented or agreed to with landowners as we approach the new financial year. But I just thought I'd flag that with you now, given the workshop that you're having this afternoon and the meeting you're having in December. Next steps. So still a bit of work to do on from the concept level design that we have to a design that will be able to go through the consenting process. That obviously doesn't need to be a full detailed design, but it needs to be enough to perform assessment of environmental effects, go through the consenting process. We then need to complete the detailed design, and then I think we can aim for construction of at least the coastal wetlands part of the project in 24-25, if not the full project. That's our presentation, Mr. Chair.
So just Today, you're whetting your appetite. We are not making a decision today on the costing. It's just, this is a start of the 10. You'll be presenting again at council on the 14th of December. Is that when you, what you said?
I won't be, but Chris will be.
Chris will be, cool, right.
It's not bad, is it? It's that bad.
Well, we're just opening the discussion now. We're not making a decision today on it. So questions to Pim and Claire, on councillor Lees and Macmillan and Ron Daddleson and Scott and Chairman Leader. Councillor Lees.
I see that there was some feedback from the drainage scheme. Be certain that their levels of service wouldn't be impacted. What do you think the risk is if we're having a pump and that may have some impact on the service of the drainage scheme?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the concern was that by disconnecting pump 10 from the 600 hectare catchment, because it's in behind the wetland, then they would reduce their capacity to from the catchment. We believe that between pump 11 and the pump that we are proposing to put at the head of the treatment plant, we can ensure that there's no loss in functionality. So the drain operating datum on a day-to-day basis, we can easily provide for that. And the time taken to clear floodwaters, that's the key criterion that we still need to just double check that we can meet their existing levels of service with the proposed design. So all I can say at the moment is that we're reasonably confident based on the work that the engineers have provided us with. We're not 100% certain yet. There are options to keep pump 10 connected, but that would require a parallel drain on the side of the treatment wetland. And we'd rather not do that because it just adds more complexity to the construction design.
Councillor Macmillan.
Thanks. I just want to understand future proofing of that. So the more expensive option with the pump. How long will that be needed for with climate change and sea level rise, etc.? Is that a temporary need and eventually it won't be needed, or is it the other way around? It's a temporary need and eventually it won't help anyway because that won't work anyway? I just don't, I haven't got a picture of it in my head. And what's that sort of time frame?
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, there are large parts of the region that rely on pumping for their productivity.
Yeah.
For the farmland to have low enough groundwater levels to grow grass, and this is no exception. The rate at which sea level rises is depending on which scenario we follow, and which RCP scenario we follow. This proposal will withstand at least several decades of sea level rise. But on that time horizon, it's difficult to say because we don't know whether we're going to accelerate the predicted rate of sea level rise or whether we're going to successfully emissions and reduce that rate of increase. It is probably important to note that there's no level of service for flood protection in the Waihi District Drainage Society's rating scheme. So they provide a pumping level of service to the ratepayers, but not a flood protection level of service. The flood protection level of service is kind of incidental, and it's developed over time as they've used the dredgings from the canals to place alongside those waterways, which has created a stock bank of salts, but it's not a geotex designed stock bank and it's not designed to withstand a particular AEC. I don't know if I've answered your question, but it's probably similar to the Kaituna rediversion in that it's an appropriate solution for the next several decades.
Yeah.
It's probably not the appropriate solution in 21, 23, because by that time, a significant portion of that flood will be part of the tidal environment again, if the predicted rate of sea level rise occurs.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Von Daddleson.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of questions. I've got a financial one as well, but let's just start with the actual plan. The Pukahina Canal is, so we're not affecting the flow in the Pongakawa Canal, not the canal, just the Pukahina Canal. So the amount of water that comes down there now, and noting that you're planning to divert some of it out to the salt marsh anyway, how much of, what percentage of the water that's in the Pukahina now are we able to actually have an effective cleansing through this process?
You, Mr. Chair, 0. We're proposing to treat the water that comes from the 600 hectare catchment between the Pongakawa and the Pukahina Canal.
Oh, so you're not treating that water at all?
Well, what we'll do is, at the moment, that 600 hectares discharges into a combination of the Pukahina Canal and the lower Pongakawa River through those 2 pump stations. We'll intercept that drain flow and treat it before it's discharged into the lower Pongakawa. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the rest of the flow, what's the, how much, because we're not treating it at all, the water that's currently coming down those canals before it goes into the salt marsh, into the harbour, is that right?
Well, we are implementing a range of land management mitigations across the catchment, and there are 60 odd agreements at the moment. So there is activity further upstream, but in terms of how much of the catchment's runoff will go through this wetland, no, that's restricted to that 600 hectare catchment that Claire put up.
Yeah, okay. So I think it would be good to get a real clear picture of the total package for that whole catchment at some stage. Not looking at that today, but so that we actually have a clear understanding of what we are achieving. And then when we get to the financials, it really worries me that not only has this got a big capital cost, but it's got an operating cost. And we bought this in partnership, and I would have thought that we would have, my assumption when we bought it in a 50-50 partnership is that our partners would make a much more substantial contribution than is indicated in these workings. And I think the versus a regional council or a TLA, private organisations or trusts, charitable trusts or whatever, have got real ability to raise money for this sort of thing. And I would like, I know we're short on time now coming up for the LTP, but I'm a bit staggered that you're putting a proposition to. I never envisaged when we bought this land that there would be such an unbalanced partnership in the cost structure. And I think there is huge capability to source money from different organisations that our partners have ability over us. And I think that needs exploring. And we've got time to explore that in 14 days is another matter. I mean,
I think you're right, it's a big cost. And the cheaper way for us to go about doing this would be restricted to a coastal wetland. And then achieve some of those outcomes that I thought were up there in terms of council's strategic framework. So that would be the way in which we could proceed without the high bill. Co-funding, Fiona has instigated a grouping of the major funders in the Bay of Plenty, which we've met with a few times on this and similar projects, and we have tried to engage with central government, but obviously the Climate Act isn't for that, and in the recent past hasn't been favourable beyond the initial contribution towards land purchase and what's already locked into that freshwater improvement fund. Yeah, I feel like we're not asking council to put any additional funding in beyond what's already in the long-term plan.
But that's our problem, is that we're deficit budgeting also, and we can deficit, myself and some other councillors, and not necessarily we haven't got a firm view on it as a council, but is that we deficit funded through the COVID period, and but we actually have to get a balanced book at some stage, and this is just another example, that where I think we're missing an opportunity with being in partnership that we could have, and by the sounds of things, you're still working on it anyway. So it's a live possibility, but I can't see how. We have to find savings somewhere, and this is a good project. So the logical way is to get our partners to actually carry some of the load, and I recognise they probably don't have funds themselves, so but we can leverage off them to raise the funds.
Mr. Ingle?
Yeah, I'm certainly agreeing with Councillor von Addelson's comments around the partner role here. I've been in discussions with colleagues in the Ministry for the Environment who've supported Te Wahapu or Waihi in being our partners on this, and said surely that should continue logically. Unfortunately, they're not in a position to make any commitment, given they've got a brand new government, and they just can't do it right now. But I would be continuing to be hopeful in that space that they would honour that continued relationship. So I think, we've got to continue to make progress and keep the momentum going in the short term, but I think in the longer term we'll be in discussions with the ministry about these sort of practical solutions for not only water quality but also blue carbon, which is one of the policies that the new government is keen on, and other outcomes that we can get from doing this sort of work with our farming community. I think they'll see.
At this stage, they're not allowed
not
sequestration for blue carbon even.
Oh, okay. I've got questions from Councillor Scott, Leader and Shirley. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, my questions are, I suppose I'm kicking myself a bit, because when I look back at the business case, and I was thinking, where was the mention about the ongoing costs of this? And the actual quote is something along the lines of additional implications will be brought separately if the tender is accepted, and that was the limit of the ongoing cost. And I'm kicking myself for not sort of thinking about that at the stage. If we just look at the financial bit, and I accept that there's actually more than a financial bit to it, but if you're just looking at the financial bit, it's not an asset, it's a liability. And so you've got to say, well, the liability has got to create additional value in terms of its climate objectives. But you can't have that rational discussion if we don't know what the additional costs are. So every time, and I'm just thinking about some ongoing projects that are in the wind, we've got to, as the people around this table, be thinking about the ongoing costs as well. And it worries me when we get told, oh, but it's the money was in the plan. The bottom line is the plan has no money, it's deficit. And so we've got to get the head around the mindset that there is no money in the budget. It's not there. So that as a mindset going forward for the projects we do is really important. And also just want to echo the idea about involving our partners. If we've got partners which have 50% ownership of this thing, and they're not contributing anything more than all we've done is they've assisted us in getting a liability. They're involved in the design. Well, if I was helping design a house didn't have to pay for, I would certainly ask for more than if I had to pay for it myself. So these are just considerations for the people around this table, I think, rather than the staff in a sense. Because I feel as if I didn't do my job at the time in interrogating this, and really it's a warning to me to do that for projects going forward.
So the Chairman Leader.
Thanks very much. The critical issue here is, as mentioned by some of the submitters, the hydraulic nature of being able to operate farms. I think you've got to be very careful about trying to justify sea level rise as, an ultimate thing where they will go. Let's remind ourselves that 25% of the Netherlands operates below sea level. And the geological nature in the Bay of Plenty here of the Pacific Plate and the Australian Plate means one's going up and the other's going down. We're going up. But my concern is similar in terms of the ongoing maintenance. I'm not familiar with this, but I would imagine that pump station 11 is the primary pump station that lifts into the canal. And then when you're suggesting, and the reality is that the less movements you have, the better it is in terms of operating costs. And I don't know whether pump station 11 is the best place, or pump station 11 should be shifted down to where, is it 15 you're talking about? Is that the one you're talking about, lifting it into the wetland?
Station 10.
10 as the outlet for the wetland.
10's, and I question that. Why would you pump water into a wetland if you've got to pump it out the far end? I mean, what is the net benefit? And maybe it's less than the 100% you're looking for, but what is the net benefit of letting it gravitate out itself? And I think the more hydraulic lifting you have, the more day-to-day maintenance they're going to require. And who's going to do that? At the moment, I imagine the farmers do it, do they? At pump station 11?
They do.
And 10.
Clearing and.
Oh, and the other question in terms of the financials, I see you've got a lease rate in there which drops down. It must drop down because the farmer is not going to utilise some of the land. But secondly, the rating is constant throughout the whole project. Why are we paying rates on something we're potentially going to retire?
That's a discussion that we need to have with the Water District Drainage Society. So they will potentially benefit by having the improved water quality and not having the cost of operating the pump. Or they carry the cost of operating the pump and we pay them the rates to do so.
You can sort it out. But is the rating just for the 10, 17, 2 and 0.5 hectares that you're talking about?
Yep.
So if it's getting retired in total, what are we paying rates on?
Remission policy.
Because it's still operating pump, it's council. It's still operating pump or pumps. But we have to pay for that.
Maybe you ought to apply for remission. Thank you.
Final question, Councillor Shirley, and then we'll move on.
Thanks, Chair. I have similar concerns to Councillor Scott. We're in a pretty tight situation, and we've got a bit of slashing and burning that we're going to have to do to face reality. And it becomes the nice to haves versus what are the basics. And when I look at this project, from the outset, I was a bit doubtful about the purchase of the 30 hectares or so. I accept it's one of my concerns is a lot of that land will likely become unproductive for economic farming, and I think trends continue, and a lot of it will be abandoned. Landowners will face that. By purchasing it, we'll almost set up an expectation of compensation and evaluation of compensation. So we could be making a real rod back moving forward. And what I'd like to know is, with the design 78,000 and the consents 100,000, is that PIM, the 78,000 for design, is that through to the full treatment option, or is that the salt marsh? Will that still have that same design?
So that's the cost that we anticipate paying this year in order to evaluate the effects of us through the consenting process, and prepare designs that are sufficient to start the procurement process.
Right. I'm also aghast that consents cost $100,000. I mean, what's happened to the consenting process when something like this costs $100,000 just to get a consent for, just dead.
Gonna fix it.
Money gone. So that's another, but to me, a pump wetland is almost perpetual motion. It's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction of terms. And our chairman sort of made the point about the Dutch 27% below sea level, but that's not a pump wetland, that's actually creating a pump dry land. There's a big distinction. To actually have a pump wetland, to me, there's something contradictory about it. And I'm just concerned that it's, while it, and we're really, it's the effluent, it's a trial effluent treatment plant to compensate for the activities of the catchment landowners. That's what it boils down to. So, where's the true liability with that? Should it be fully targeted on that basis? Because it's that they have created the problem with their land use activities. And we're just talking about a really small sort of minor trial effluent treatment plant. I come down, I favour the salt marsh option, quite frankly. My final question is, with the blue carbon issue, I understand a salt marsh would give a much significantly greater blue carbon than would the treatment option.
So through you, Mr. Chair, yes, to the last point, and also to the option of creating 100% salt marsh across the land would be cheaper to run, cheaper to build, and more resilient to climate change. There's no doubt about that. It just doesn't hit that water quality priority that we were trying to address as we put it together. We were trying to hit that because that was in council's strategic framework as one of the key goals. If the direction from council is to focus on the salt marsh only wetland, I think there are still substantial benefits from going down that path. And it does address a number of Councillor Scott's points about the liabilities associated with running it, and Councillor McMillan issues in the future with the rise. So it would be a change in direction from where we've been heading so far, but it's the right time to make that kind of change.
Lenise?
My question is, if the council considered that right now we couldn't afford the treatment wetland, and we chose a smart salt marsh option, what would be the sunk costs that we would have to forego if sometime in the future we decided that we might turn some of that into a treatment wetland? So can it be staged? Can we start with salt marsh and then have a look at the outcomes? And then if they're not good, think about a treatment wetland. Is that a feasible option, or are we actually sinking costs into the development of the salt marsh that would be money wasted and ultimately do a treatment wetland?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the way to avoid sunk costs would be to partition the wetland as provided in Claire's scheme. Create the 20 hectares of salt marsh, but continue to lease the 10 hectares earmarked for treatment wetland to the farmer, and have that as grazing land. That would also have the benefit of retaining hydraulic access to pump station 10 for the farmers, which meant that we could get away with putting 20 hectares of salt marsh together without sinking costs into a potential treatment wetland that may or may not go ahead in the future. We could then add that in the future if and when our resources allow.
And what would be the cost of 20 hectares of salt marsh?
Claire, off the top of your head, can you separate that out?
$500K.
Yeah, 575 per council plus. It would probably be much simpler from a feasibility design and consenting perspective than the full treatment wetland, because that's where those effects would be generated from the adjacent landowners.
Chairman Leader.
Oh, just out of interest, Pim, where's the drainage from Ferreri Canal to the Pongokawa Canal? Where does that end up? Because the Kaikokapu Canal has pumped water into it as well. Where does that stuff go?
So that Wharere and the Kaikokapu join at the mouth of the estuary, so at the upper end of the estuary near its western corner. And the Puna and the Pongokawa join, they enter the estuary in the southeastern corner.
Natural drainage, is that the answer to the question? In between the Pongokawa Canal, it's Ferreri Road. How does all that water get out?
There are pump stations down Wharere Road to the Wharere Canal area.
You've got a bit of work to do in terms of your option 2 you've ruled out. Option 3 is your preferred option, but option 1 sounds like a not a stop-go method, but a sort of an interim. We probably want to see some more work done on this option 1, just in terms of a partial salt marsh. Come back to us.
Can I ask, would councillors prefer to see us design the 20 hectares and leave the 10 as a future option, or design 30 hectares of salt marsh? Would you be able to provide that guidance at this point?
Just a comment about that. If our partners, Tangata Whenua partners, were able to fundraise or get partners either from the Ministry for the Environment or from charitable entities, then, we could still go ahead with the 10 hectare wetland. So I'm sort of thinking, let's start with a 20 hectare salt marsh and see what we do with the balance, depending on funding.
In the meantime, leave it as 10 hectares lease land and wait for our partners and our partners could be anybody. I mean, it's not just the society. Wait for other funding streams to come on board. Is that a fair analysis?
Can I just ask a question? So in response to your question about the 30 or the 20, if you were to go about, let's just say hypothetically, doing the whole 30 as a salt marsh, would that be a different engineering concept altogether to doing the 20 and keeping the 10?
You just expand the area.
So hypothetically, you could convert that 10 to either a treatment wetland or a salt marsh whenever.
That's another option. We could revert back to the 10 hectares one day if the whole 30 hectares were. Okay, that's a different option again. Councillor Scott and then Crosby.
Yeah, just want to, Councillor Lee's your suggestion that any funding might only go for the extra 10. Even 1 hectare is borrowed money. So the mindset I want to get into is we should be looking for funding to help us with the 20 as well. It's not,
Not discounting that either, and saying if we need to give direction to staff, the expensive option is perhaps a bit unpalatable.
Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Pam. Engagement to date have you had on this?
We've haven't yet seen the numbers, and so that we've met with Te Wapu Waihi, the District Drainage Society at their AGM, and the farmers that own land in the 600 hectare catchment.
So, Chair, that's all I need to know. I think that you need to do that first, and then come back. If we're supposed to be operating in a true partnership, I think it would be disastrous if we made some kind of sense of direction today without engaging with them. And as you say, there is money in the budget now, whether it stays like that or goes down, so that's for another day. Let's do this step by step. in my view. Engage with them on this model. They might have some other ideas. And come back to us, and we'll see where the budget lands in that global catchment space, not necessarily this specific project, and then make a decision.
Okay, so,
If that's setting us up to fail, to say, what would you like to do? And the suggestion comes back, option X, and then we say, oh, but we can't pay for that, so you can't have it. That's not operating in good faith at all. Operating in good faith is saying, this is what we have the funds, or we are prepared to commit fund to, and it's 20 hectares. If you want something different from that, then by all means, tell us what your contribution is going to be. But if we go in there and say, what would you like? And then afterwards say, no, you can't have it, that's really bad faith.
No, I disagree. I think you'll be acting in bad faith if you predetermine an outcome. Yes, I understand where you're coming from, and we will make that decision in due course. But at the moment, I don't think we're that far advanced in the process.
I think if I can add one last comment, Mr. Chair, that the partners are aware of the financial position of council. They know that this is a big project and it's potentially a big imposition if we go ahead with it as planned. And they know that the authority to finance the project does lie with council. I think if we were to go back and say, and we've got some direction that there is no money, it's borrowed money, and that council has authorised us going ahead with the 20 hectares, but at this moment has asked us to pause and relook at the 10 and leave our options open. I don't see that as being problematic in terms of going back to the stakeholders at all.
okay, so you've got a bit of work to do. There, no, I'm going to leave it at that. We need to move on. Thanks, Kat. So we're just receiving this report today. It's a starter for 10. It's whetting the appetite. Thank you, Councillor Von Delson, seconded by Scott. I'll put that resolution. We're just receiving the report. We're not making any decisions. You've got a bit of homework to do, Pim. Yes. Resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Right, Joe, your turn. Rates collection status update. This is on page 161. And lots more people are paying early.
Thank you, councillors. Good afternoon. I'll try and keep this brief because I know you've got a big action-packed afternoon.
Yeah, 5 minutes left.
Yeah. So what I just wanted to do was just tell you a bit of a brief update from when the report was written. We're now at 94% collection, so we've got 6% or 6.4% remaining. So we're in a good situation to be able to confidently collect on par with what we've heard.
So that's 94% have either paid or they are signed up to pay.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
So how compared to last year, same time last year, we were sitting around the
Sitting around 86% last year. So we're well ahead, and I think it's just that familiarity now that's come about. Just on direct debits, when we sent out the penalty letters earlier this month, we've actually subsequently had another 2,000 customers sign up for direct debits. So we've just passed the 42,000 mark. So we've seen an increase of from 37,000 in August to 42,000 direct debits.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so it's definitely a strong increase. And also I just wanted to note that we've had 9,000 customers that had received a penalty, they've subsequently paid. So, or we've
the penalty as well.
No, we've looked at the penalty. But what we've done is we've been able to remit the penalty because they've been able to pay or set up a direct debit arrangement. So with that, I'll take my report.
Councillor Scott.
Look, I just want to recognise the call centre staff who I know have had been under real pressure and had some pretty aggravated calls. And also our front desk staff have had things thrown at them. So just really want to recognise the work that they've done, and if that message can be passed on, I'm sure we'd all agree.
Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, much the same. First year was always going to be difficult. I was worried at 87%. That's not a good result at penalty date.
previous life, it wasn't in the mid-90s upwards. Real so here it's up to 94, and with Lyman, I'm sure next year you'll probably start off with a higher benchmark well before, penalty day.
No further questions. Thank you, Joe. Just received the report, rates collection status update. Another mover, please. Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Nees. All those in favour, please say aye. Motion carried. Final one for the day, 170. Rachel, customer service performance update on page 170. Oh, you are there. Slip chain. Go.
Yep, good afternoon, council. As Joe's just mentioned, the second year of rates collection has gone extremely well. We're really pleased. We've moved into a business as usual processing. Noting the comments from Councillor Scott, it has been a challenging year for the team, but they've done extremely well. A lot of the improvements that were identified after the first year have been implemented, and that resulted in a large reduction in queries this year, but also an 8% increase in customer satisfaction for rates. I'm happy to also take the report as read and answer any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Nees?
Just one. Sometimes customers are never going to be satisfied, aren't they? Because you cannot give them what they perhaps want. So do we differentiate between satisfied with the outcome and satisfied with how they're treated?
Yes, through you, the chair, that's a very good comment. We do, Councillor Nees, we try to, where we can, differentiate those responses, because we know sometimes it's just because they just don't like having to pay rates. We examine the comments that we get back through the surveys, and that gives us a good insight, but otherwise often it's just a yes or no, they're satisfied or not. So where we can, we do try to get further insight into those comments.
Because the way people are dealt with makes a huge difference as to what they think of us, even if they don't get the answer they want. Yes.
Councillor Scott?
I'm just, on page 179, you refer to COVID restrictions. Have we still got some sort of restrictions in place?
Sorry, no, not at all. That would have ended up in the website.
Okay, resolution to receive Rachel's report. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Von Daddleston, seconded by Councillor McMillan. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. End of our reports. Before I close, can I just thank Paula? Thank you for your kind comments back to for the agenda item today. Thank you for that. And can I thank Amanda, Ruben and Chris and Ron for helping us put this agenda together and the work program that we've done in the last year. So declare that meeting closed. Wish you well, and Mr. Chair.